Hello friends. Did you know nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy these stories, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps. Thank you for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. For 7 years, I've been chasing storms behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler. Most truckers I know think I'm out of my mind. But hauling cargo in weather that grounds planes and forces civilians into basements makes me feel alive. Adrenaline, the raw power of nature pressing down on 60,000 pounds of steel and cargo. It's a thrill you can't find anywhere else. That Tuesday, at the end of May, started like any other day. I picked up a load of industrial equipment in Wichita. Hydraulic parts, drilling components, the usual heavy machinery headed for an oil field operation outside Tulsa. The manifest said 32,000 pounds, well within my truck's capacity. By the time I left the depot around noon, the sky was already showing signs of instability, with low, purple-tinged mammatus clouds hanging over the Kansas plains. My name is Cole Briggs, and I've seen severe weather conditions enough to recognize when the atmosphere is brewing something bad. The temperature was approaching 92 degrees, the humidity was thick enough to swim in, and the dew point was below 70. Classic supercell conditions. Before hitting the road, I checked the radar on my phone. About 80 miles southwest, a mesoscale convective system was forming along the dry line. Perfect. Most storm chasers use cars, vans, SUVs. They're mobile. They can turn around quick. They can take back roads that would snap an axle on my Peterbilt. But I learned early on that if you know your rig, know your routes, and more importantly, know when to push and when to back off, you can get into positions those weekend warriors only dream about. Plus, I'm getting paid to be out here. The company doesn't need to know I sometimes take the scenic route through a squall line. I merged onto I-35 heading south, the CB radio crackling with the usual chatter. Truck stops, way stations, speed traps. I kept one ear on Channel 19 and the other monitoring weather frequencies on my handheld. The Storm Prediction Center had issued a moderate risk for severe weather across central Oklahoma and southern Kansas, with tornado watches likely by mid-afternoon. The drive started normal enough. Traffic was light for a Tuesday, just the usual mix of semis hauling commerce across the heartland, and tourists who didn't understand that the fast lane isn't for sightseeing. I made good time through Wichita, watching the sky darken to the west. By 2 o'clock, I could see the anvil spreading out ahead of me, that characteristic mushroom shape of a mature supercell reaching into the stratosphere. Then my phone buzzed with a tornado warning for Sumner County. I grinned, right on schedule. I've always had this thing about storms. When I was a kid, growing up outside Oklahoma City, my dad would take me out to watch the weather roll in. He wasn't a chaser, he was an electrician, but he understood that some people just needed to see it. The power. The chaos. The reminder that for all our concrete and steel and technology, nature can still make us feel small. After he died when I was 19, I found myself drawn to the storms more and more. Started driving truck at 22, and it just made sense to combine the two. Why fight the weather when you can ride it? Why take boring routes when you can thread the needle between updraft bases and watch lightning strike so close you can smell the ozone? The radar showed the cell intensifying as I approached the Oklahoma border. I pulled off at a truck stop just south of Wellington to fuel up and check my tie-downs. The wind was already picking up, that pre-storm breeze that tastes like electricity and rain. A few other drivers were huddled under the awning, smoking and watching the western horizon go dark. "You planning on driving through that?" one of them asked, a heavy-set guy with a Schneider cap and a skeptical expression. "Planning on it," I said. He shook his head. You're crazy, man. They're talking baseball-sized hail. That's what load insurance is for. He walked away muttering something about death wishes and idiots. I didn't blame him. Most drivers would hole up for a few hours, wait for the storms to pass. But I'd checked the models that morning, studied the photographs and wind shear parameters. This system would be intense but fast-moving, and there was a gap I could exploit if I timed it right. I got back in the cab and pulled onto Highway 160, heading southwest toward the Kansas-Oklahoma line. This was the route I'd planned, a county highway that would take me south of the main cell, close enough to see the structure but hopefully avoiding the hail core. The radar showed the storm moving northeast at about 40 miles per hour, which meant I needed to maintain a parallel track. The sky was apocalyptic now. The anvil overhead had spread out to cover probably 100 square miles, all dark gray, shot through with that sickly green tint that means the atmosphere is loaded with moisture and energy. To my west, I could see the wall cloud rotating, a lowering of the cloud base that looked like a massive fist descending from the sky. Lightning flickered inside the storm every few seconds, not the branching kind you see in summer thunderstorms, but those intense cloud-to-cloud pulses that light up the entire structure. My CB crackled. This is Roadrunner to any westbound traffic on 160. You got some nasty weather ahead. Multiple reports of funnel clouds and large hail. Might want to find somewhere to park it. I picked up the mic. Copy that, Roadrunner. This is Storm Chaser. I'm tracking it on radar. Appreciate the heads up. There was a pause, then... Storm Chaser? You the crazy bastard who drives into these things? Guilty. Well, good luck, brother. Keep the shiny side up. I smiled. The trucking community is tight-knit, and word gets around. I'd earned a reputation over the years. Some thought I was reckless. Others respected the calculated risks I took. Truth was, I was probably somewhere in between. The rain started about 10 minutes later. Big, fat drops that sounded like gravel hitting the windshield. Within seconds, it was a deluge, my wipers on maximum and barely keeping up. Visibility dropped to maybe 50 feet. I slowed to 45, my Jake brake engaged, watching the road carefully for any signs of flooding. That's when I noticed the first strange thing. My GPS showed Highway 160 continuing straight southwest for another 12 miles before intersecting with US 64. But on the screen, a thin gray line appeared. A road that wasn't there before. Or rather, a road that my GPS had never shown before. It branched off 160 about 3 miles ahead, heading almost due south. I frowned, zooming in on the display. The road had no designation, no county route number, just a thin line cutting through the empty space between townships. I'd driven this route maybe 30 times over the years, and I'd never seen that turnoff. Could be a mapping error, I thought. Or maybe a private access road that got added to the database. Farmers sometimes had deals with GPS companies to include their property roads for emergency access. But something about it bothered me. The line was too straight, too deliberate, and it appeared to run parallel to the storm's track, almost like it was drawn to follow the weather. I shook off the thought and focused on driving. The rain was getting worse, mixed with small hail now, pea-sized pellets that pinged off the hood. Through the gray curtain, I could see debris starting to blow across the road. Tumbleweeds, mostly, but also pieces of shingles and what looked like part of a barn door. The storm was getting close to producing. My weather radio squawked. The National Weather Service has issued a tornado warning for Harper County, Kansas, and Woods County, Oklahoma, until 4:15 p.m. Doppler radar indicated a severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado. This dangerous storm was located near Buffalo, moving northeast at 40 miles per hour. Hazards include tornado and baseball-sized hail. Flying debris will be dangerous to those caught without shelter. I was right in the path, but I'd planned for this. According to my calculations, if I maintained my current speed and heading, I'd slip south of the circulation before it crossed the highway. It would be close, maybe too close, but I'd driven through worse. The wind was really howling now, buffeting the trailer and making the rig sway. I could feel the weight shifting as gusts hit from different angles. My hands were tight on the wheel, making constant micro-adjustments to keep us centered in the lane. The rain was so thick I almost missed the turnoff. There it was, a gravel road cutting south off the highway, exactly where my GPS said it would be. And there was a sign, old and weathered, barely readable through the rain. County Road 1140. That was wrong. I knew all the county roads in this area, and there was no CR 1140. The numbers in Harper County ran sequentially, and they'd skipped that designation decades ago because of some surveying error. This road shouldn't exist. But there it was, and my GPS was now showing my route going down that road, like it had recalculated without me inputting anything. The blue line on the screen diverged from Highway 160 and followed the gravel track south, deeper into the storm's path. I should have kept going on 160. Every instinct I'd developed over 7 years of storm chasing was screaming at me to ignore the GPS and stick to the main road. But there was something compelling about that turnoff, something that made me ease off the accelerator and drift toward the shoulder. The rain was a solid wall now. My wipers were useless. I could barely see 10 feet in front of the hood. And in that moment of reduced visibility, with the wind screaming and hail starting to pound the roof, I made the turn. The second my tires hit that gravel road, everything changed. The rain didn't let up, but the quality of it shifted. It was hard to describe. The drops seemed heavier, more deliberate, like they were falling in patterns instead of random chaos. The wind, too, lost its gusty unpredictability and became a steady pressure from the west, pushing against the driver's side with unnatural consistency. I downshifted, feeling the gravel crunch under my wheels. The road was in surprisingly good condition for something that supposedly didn't exist. Well-maintained, properly graded, with clear drainage ditches on both sides. This wasn't some abandoned farm track. Someone had worked on this recently. My CB radio hissed with static. I tried to raise anyone on Channel 19, but got nothing back except white noise. Not unusual in severe weather. Lightning can play hell with radio propagation, but this static had a rhythm to it, almost like breathing. Long hiss, short pause, long hiss, short pause. I turned the volume down and focused on the road. The GPS showed me continuing south for about 8 miles before the road curved back east toward US 64. That would put me well south of the tornado track and position me to come up behind the storm system. Risky, but doable. What bothered me was the map itself. When I zoomed out, trying to see the larger context, the display flickered. Just for a second, but long enough that I noticed. And when it came back, the road I was on seemed to shift slightly, like the GPS was updating its position in real time. Roads don't do that. They're fixed features surveyed and mapped with precision. They don't move. The hail was getting larger now, marble-sized and coming down hard enough to leave dimples in the hood. I definitely have paint damage, but that was the least of my concerns. Through the rain and hail, I started to see shapes on either side of the road. Trees, I thought at first, but that wasn't right. This part of Kansas was open prairie, no tree lines for miles. But there they were. Dark, vertical forms maybe 15 feet tall, spaced evenly about 30 yards apart. As I passed one, my headlights caught it for just a moment. Not a tree. A telephone pole. But old style, wooden, with glass insulators and ceramic crossarms, the kind they stopped using in the 70s, and the wires strung between them were swaying in the wind, but not like cables should sway. They moved in synchronization, all rising and falling together, like something was pulling them in rhythm. The breathing on the CB grew louder. I reached over and turned the radio completely off, but I could still hear it, a faint hiss that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. It reminded me of the sound a gas leak makes, or air escaping from a tire, but deeper, more organic. My phone buzzed. A text from my dispatcher. "Cole, where are you? Your GPS signal dropped 10 minutes ago. Please confirm position." 10 minutes? I'd only turned onto this road maybe 3 minutes ago. I looked at the clock on my dash. 4:47 p.m. That couldn't be right. The tornado warning was issued at 3:45, and I turned off the highway shortly after. I should have been on this road for 5 minutes max, not long enough for my GPS signal to drop for 10 minutes. I tried to reply but got no service. 0 bars. I was in the middle of the Kansas plains. Coverage out here was spotty, but I'd never had 0 bars on this highway before. The road ahead started to curve, gentle at first, then more pronounced. According to my GPS, which was still somehow working, even though my phone had no service, I should be heading east now. But my compass, mounted on the dash, was pointing west. No, not pointing west, spinning. Slowly, but definitely rotating clockwise, the needle sweeping past north, east, south, and back to west in a lazy circle. Magnetic interference from the storm? Possible. Lightning carries tremendous electrical current, and strong enough fields can mess with compasses. But the storm was to my west and north, not all around me, and the needle wasn't jumping erratically like it would from nearby strikes. It was rotating smoothly, deliberately, like something was pulling it in a circle. The telephone poles were getting closer together now, maybe 20 yards apart instead of 30, and the wires between them, I could see them more clearly now through the rain, weren't sagging like old cables should. They were taut, almost vibrating, and when the lightning flashed, I could swear I saw something running along them. Not electricity, something darker, more solid, moving against the light. I glanced at my mirrors and felt my stomach drop. The road behind me was gone. Not obscured by rain, not hidden by darkness. Gone. My taillights illuminated maybe 20 feet of gravel, and then there was just nothing. A wall of black that didn't look like storm clouds or night or fog. Just absolute void, like the road had been erased from existence behind me. I pressed the accelerator, my heart rate spiking. The engine responded, but we weren't moving faster. The tach showed 1,800 RPMs, the transmission in 8th gear, but my speedometer was dropping. 50, 45, 40. Like I was driving uphill, even though the road was flat. The breathing on the CB was getting faster now, more insistent. And underneath it, I started to hear something else. A voice. Not words exactly, but the rhythm of speech, like someone talking in a language I couldn't quite parse. The cadence rose and fell, always just on the edge of comprehension. My headlights caught something on the side of the road. A vehicle. An old pickup truck. Maybe a Ford from the 80s, sitting perfectly square in the shallow ditch. The doors were closed, windows intact, no obvious damage. Just sitting there like someone had parked it and walked away. But the truck was sinking. Not into mud or water. Into the ground itself. The tires were already buried halfway, and even as I passed, I could see the chassis settling lower, the earth swallowing it an inch at a time. I didn't stop, whatever this was, whatever I'd driven into. Stopping felt like the worst possible option. Keep moving. That was the rule every storm chaser learned early. When you're in danger, Mobility is survival. The road curved again, more sharply this time, and suddenly I was driving due north. My compass was still spinning, but the road was definitely heading back toward the storm. I could see the wall cloud through the windshield now, closer than it should be, closer than any storm structure should be able to get in 3 minutes of driving. No, I realized, I wasn't approaching it. It was approaching me. The entire supercell was shifting, rotating, the mesocyclone turning like a massive gear, and somehow this road was caught in its motion. The wall cloud stretched across the entire northern horizon, maybe 2 miles wide, rotating visibly now with that slow, grinding power that always made my mouth go dry. And there was something wrong with the rotation. Storms in the northern hemisphere rotate counterclockwise, driven by the Coriolis effect and wind shear. It's as fundamental as water draining counterclockwise in a sink. But this wall cloud was rotating the wrong direction. Clockwise. Slowly, majestically, impossibly, grinding clockwise against every law of atmospheric physics I knew. The voice on the CB was louder now, definitely words, definitely English, but filtered through so much static and interference that I could only catch fragments. Line follows the, shouldn't have taken, count the poles. Count the poles? I looked at the telephone poles flashing past in my headlights. They were even closer now, maybe 15 yards apart. As I watched, one of the wires between them snapped. Not from wind or weight, but snapped cleanly like it had been cut. The severed ends whipped in the wind, and that dark shape I'd seen earlier ran along the remaining wires, moving toward the next pole with purposeful speed. My phone buzzed again. Another text from dispatch, but when I glanced at it, the message was garbled. Yes, sir. GPS and now. D since my hands ego. Paya. C pause. An. The corrupted text made my skin crawl. I tried to reply again, pecked out a message with one hand while keeping my eyes on the road. I'm okay, on detour, we'll update soon. But when I hit send, my phone froze. The screen showed the message sending. The progress bar stuck at about 73%. And then the phone just died. Not low battery, I'd charged it that morning, just dead. The screen going black like someone had reached into the circuits and flipped a switch. The rain was changing now. Still heavy, still reducing visibility to almost nothing, but the drops were larger, more irregular. I realized with growing horror that they were hitting the windshield in patterns. Not random impacts, but sequences. 3 hits on the left, pause, 2 hits in the center, pause, 3 hits on the right. Over and over, the same pattern, like something was tapping out a code on the glass. The road straightened out, running perfectly north now, aimed directly at the heart of that wrong-way rotating wall cloud. My speedometer was reading 25 miles per hour, even though I had the accelerator floored and the engine was screaming. The tach was pushing redline, but we were crawling, and the road was rising, not a hill, not a grade. The gravel was literally tilting upward ahead of me, the surface buckling and lifting like something underneath was pushing it up. I could see the peak maybe a quarter mile ahead, the road cresting against the storm-black sky, and beyond it, nothing. Just that same absolute darkness I'd seen in my mirrors. The telephone poles had become a blur now, maybe 10 feet apart. The wires strung so close together they formed almost a solid wall on either side of the road. The dark shapes were everywhere now, hundreds of them, moving along the wires in coordinated patterns, weaving in and out. They almost looked like... No, I wasn't going to think about what they looked like. My compass stopped spinning. The needle pointed straight up, perpendicular to the horizontal plane of the gauge. That wasn't possible. Compasses don't point up. But there it was, the needle straining against its housing, trembling with the effort of pointing toward something above me. I looked up through the windshield at the wall cloud, and I saw it. In the center of the rotation, in the core of that clockwise grinding mesocyclone, there was a gap. Not a funnel, not a pendant cloud formation. A perfect circular gap in the cloud deck, maybe 100 feet across, and through it I could see. I don't know what I saw. Colors that shouldn't exist. Geometries that hurt to look at. The suggestion of vast movement in spaces that should have been empty sky. The breathing on the CB resolved into words. The line follows. The line follows. The line follows the line. My hands were locked on the steering wheel so tight my knuckles had gone white. The road was still rising, 30 degrees now, 40, and my rig shouldn't have been able to maintain traction, but somehow the tires gripped the gravel like glue. The peak was close, maybe 100 feet, and beyond it, that wall of nothing waiting to swallow me. I should have jammed on the brakes, should have thrown the transmission into reverse, jackknifed the trailer if I had to, done anything to stop this forward momentum. But I couldn't. My foot was frozen on the accelerator, my hands immovable on the wheel. Not paralyzed, I could feel everything, could feel the vibration of the engine and the texture of the steering wheel grip. But some part of my brain that controlled voluntary movement had been shut off, locked down, relegated to passenger status while something else drove. The CB voice changed, became clearer, lost its static filter. Count the poles, Cole. Count them before you cross. How did it know my name? The telephone poles were a continuous fence now, maybe 3 feet apart. The wires so densely packed they formed a solid curtain. The dark shapes on the wires had stopped moving. They were all aligned now, all facing the road, arranged in perfect symmetry on both sides. Watching, waiting. Count them! The voice screamed through the CB, and this time I recognized it. It was my father's voice. Dad, dead for 16 years, shouting at me through a CB radio in the middle of a storm that shouldn't exist on a road that couldn't be real. I started counting. The poles flashed by so fast I could barely track them, but I counted anyway. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The numbers built in my head, stamped themselves into my consciousness with each passing post. 23, 24, 25. The peak was right there, 10 feet away, the road cresting into that impossible darkness. 51, I shouted into the empty cab. There are 51 poles. The instant I said it, everything stopped. The rain ceased. Not slowed, not tapered off, ceased. One moment there was a deluge, the next there was nothing. The wind died. The engine's scream cut to idle. My rig sat perfectly still on a level gravel road, no longer climbing, no longer moving at all, and it was completely silent. I took my hands off the wheel, flexing my fingers to restore circulation. My foot came off the accelerator. The sudden return of voluntary control was disorienting, like waking up from a dream where you couldn't move. Through the windshield I saw that I was parked at a T intersection. The gravel road I'd been on ended here, meeting a paved 2-lane highway. There was a stop sign, perfectly normal, slightly rusted, and beyond it, Highway 160. The same road I'd left what felt like hours ago. My GPS flickered back to life, recalculating. According to the display, I was exactly where I should be. At the junction of County Road 1140 and Highway 160, about 18 miles south of where I'd turned off. The timestamp said 4:02 p.m. I looked at my dash clock, 4:02 p.m. I'd been on that road for 7 minutes, not the hours it had felt like. 7 minutes to drive 18 miles on a gravel road in a severe thunderstorm, which was physically impossible. My rig topped out at maybe 80 miles per hour downhill with a tailwind, and there was no way I'd been going that fast on gravel. I looked in my mirrors. The road behind me was gone again, but this time in a normal way. The intersection was simply hidden by a slight rise in the terrain. No void, no darkness, just Kansas prairie and storm clouds. The CB was silent now, just normal static. My compass pointed north. My phone turned back on with a cheerful startup chime, showing full service and a dozen missed calls from dispatch. I should have felt relief, should have been shaking with adrenaline come down, grateful to be alive and back in reality. But all I felt was hollow, because I knew what I'd seen. I knew what had happened. And I knew with absolute certainty that I'd gotten off easy. The sky to the west was clearing, the supercell moving northeast and already beginning to fall apart as the sun set behind thinning clouds. The tornado warnings had been canceled, the severe weather over. I pulled onto Highway 160 and continued south toward Tulsa, my hands steady on the wheel, my heart rate slowly returning to normal. I delivered my load the next morning without incident, filed my mileage report, collected my pay. But I never told anyone about County Road 1140. What would I say? That I drove for hours on a road that only took 7 minutes? That I saw telephone poles that shouldn't exist, and shapes moving on wires and a storm that rotated the wrong way? Instead, I did something else. I went to the Harper County Records Office and asked to see historical maps of the area. The clerk was helpful, pulling out survey charts and old highway department documents. And there, on a map from 1951, I found it. County Road 1140, a rural route that connected Highway 160 to US 64, used primarily by farmers and ranchers. Decommissioned in 1967 after 3 separate accidents during severe weather. Officially closed and removed from state records in 1973. Why was it closed? I asked the clerk. She pulled up the old accident reports. Says here, drivers reported disorientation during storms, getting lost, seeing things that weren't there. One guy claimed he drove for hours but only minutes passed. They figured it was something about the topography, maybe magnetic deposits in the soil playing tricks on people's instruments. Did anyone die? She scrolled through the documents. No deaths, but everyone who drove that road during bad weather reported the same things. Confusion, time distortion, seeing... She squinted at the faded text. Seeing shapes moving along the telephone lines. I felt cold sweat break out across my back. What kind of shapes? Doesn't say. Just says multiple witnesses reported dark shapes moving in coordination along the telephone wires. Power company inspected the lines, found nothing wrong. Still, after the third incident, the county decided to just close the whole road, rerouted traffic to safer highways. But the road is still there, I said. I drove it yesterday. She frowned. That's impossible. The road was plowed under in 1974. They planted over it, returned it to prairie. There's no physical road anymore. I thanked her and left, my mind reeling, because I knew the road was real. I had gravel dust in my wheel wells and a crack in my windshield from the hail to prove it. I'd driven every inch of those impossible 18 miles. That night, I pulled up weather archives for the day I'd been there. And that's when I found the last piece of the puzzle. There had been a severe weather outbreak on May 28th, exactly as I remembered. Multiple tornadoes, large hail, high winds. But according to NOAA's Storm Prediction Center records, there had been an anomaly, a small, isolated line of thunderstorms that appeared on radar for approximately 7 minutes before vanishing. The meteorologists noted it in their post-event analysis as a technical glitch, a radar error, probably caused by a software bug or interference from a nearby transmission tower. But I pulled up the radar loop from that afternoon, and there it was. At exactly 3:55 p.m., a thin, impossibly straight line of echoes, running almost perfectly north-south along the Kansas-Oklahoma border. It didn't move like normal storms moved. It didn't rotate or propagate or evolve. It just existed, a static line on the radar, for 7 minutes. And then it disappeared. No meteorologist could explain it. No weather service could account for it. The official position was that it was a technical error, a ghost echo, meaningless data. But I'd driven through it. I'd felt the rain that fell in patterns and heard the voice on the CB and counted those telephone poles. I'd seen that wrong-way rotating wall cloud and the impossible gap in its center. The file from NOAA had one more note, buried in the technical details. During those 7 minutes, GPS signals in the immediate area had experienced errors. Dozens of commercial vehicles, trucks mostly, had reported their navigation systems glitching, showing routes that didn't exist, roads that had been decommissioned decades ago. Most of them had ignored their GPS and stayed on the main highways, but a few had turned off, following those phantom roads. And for those few, time had worked differently. 7 minutes on the clock, but hours in their memories. 7 minutes on radar, but miles of impossible driving. I was one of them. But apparently not the first, and probably not the last. 3 weeks passed before I told anyone about County Road 1140. I'd been avoiding dispatch, taking loads that kept me in the eastern half of the country, far from Kansas and Oklahoma and that whole cursed stretch of Highway 160. Pennsylvania to Virginia, Georgia to Illinois, anywhere but the plains. But the memory followed me. Every time I saw a thunderstorm building on the horizon, every time my GPS recalculated a route, I felt that hollow sensation in my gut. I finally broke down and called Dalton Reed, a fellow storm chaser I'd known for about 4 years. Dalton wasn't a trucker. He made his living selling storm footage to news stations and weather channels, but he understood the pull of severe weather. He'd been in the situations where the atmosphere did things that shouldn't be possible, seen phenomena that conventional meteorology couldn't explain. We met at a truck stop outside Springfield, Missouri, on a humid afternoon in mid-June. Dalton pulled up in his chase vehicle, a lifted Ford Expedition bristling with antennas and camera mounts. He'd gotten more serious about his equipment lately, I noticed. Dual dash cams, a 360-degree recording system, even what looked like a lightning trigger sensor mounted on the roof rack. "Cole!" He climbed out and shook my hand. "Been too long, man. Heard you've been staying east of the Mississippi. Thought you lived for Great Plains storms. Had a weird experience," I said. "Need to talk to someone who won't think I'm losing it." We grabbed coffee and I told him everything. The wrong road, the telephone poles, the breathing on the CB. His expression shifted from amused to concerned to deeply unsettled as I walked him through the details. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, stirring his coffee absently. "The radar anomaly," he finally said. "You're sure about the date and time?" May 28th, between 3:55 and 4:02 p.m. I pulled the archives myself. I remember that day. Dalton's face had gone pale. I was chasing in northern Oklahoma, trying to get south of a wedge tornado near Alva, and I saw that line appear on my radar, just for a few minutes like you said. I thought it was a glitch too. But I could hear the question in his voice. But I wasn't the only one who saw it. There's a weather weenie forum I follow, bunch of radar nerds who analyze every system. And that day, maybe a dozen people posted screenshots of that line. They were all confused, trying to figure out what would cause such a perfect linear echo. And then someone pointed out that the line was exactly where County Road 1140 used to be. My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. Used to be, yeah. Dalton pulled out his phone and started searching through saved bookmarks. Some of us storm chasers are also history buffs. We track old, severe weather events, try to figure out patterns, and County Road 1140 came up in a research paper from the 70s. A meteorologist named Dr. Marcus Brennan from Oklahoma State University studied atmospheric anomalies along the Kansas-Oklahoma border. He documented 15 separate incidents between 1951 and 1967 where drivers reported temporal distortions, visual hallucinations, and instrument failures on that road during severe weather. The county clerk mentioned accidents. She said they closed the road because people got disoriented. It was more than disorientation. Dalton found what he was looking for and handed me his phone. "Read this." It was a scanned document, typewritten on yellowed paper. The header read, "Atmospheric Phenomena and Perceptual Anomalies. A Study of County Road 1140, Harper County, Kansas." The date was June 1968. I skimmed through technical jargon about wind shear and mesocyclone formation until I reached the case studies. Dalton had highlighted one section. Subject 7 reported driving south on CR 1140 during a severe thunderstorm on May 15, 1963. According to his account, he turned onto the road at approximately 5:20 p.m. and encountered heavy rain and hail. His vehicle clock and wristwatch both indicated he drove for 3 hours and 47 minutes before emerging back onto Highway 160. However, witnesses who saw him turn onto CR 1140 and later saw him emerge placed the elapsed time at 11 minutes. When confronted with this discrepancy, Subject 7 became agitated and insisted his timepieces were correct. He described seeing organized movement along the telephone wires and hearing rhythmic sounds on his AM radio that seemed to count in sequence. I felt my hands shaking slightly as I read. This happened before. Multiple times, according to Brennan. But here's the really weird part. Dalton took his phone back and scrolled to another section. Every single incident occurred during severe weather, and every single incident happened during a specific type of storm. Supercells with strong rotation but no tornado production. The atmosphere was primed, the dynamics were perfect, but the storms never dropped funnels. Like the storm I drove through? Exactly like the storm you drove through. Dalton leaned back in his chair. Brennan had a theory, but it got him laughed out of academia. He proposed that under specific atmospheric conditions, the electromagnetic fields generated by rotating updrafts could interact with the geological features, mineral deposits, fault lines, that sort of thing, to create what he called temporal displacement zones, areas where the normal flow of time becomes elastic. I stared at him. "You're telling me a thunderstorm can bend time?" "I'm telling you that's what Brennan thought, and it destroyed his career. He couldn't prove it, couldn't replicate it under controlled conditions. But he documented 15 cases where drivers experienced exactly what you experienced. Time dilation, perceptual anomalies, seeing things that shouldn't exist. What happened to him, Brennan?" Dalton's expression darkened. "He died in 1974, drove into a supercell in Harper County and never came out. They found his car 3 days later, parked on a county road that had been closed for 7 years. His watch had stopped at 7:41 p.m. His car's odometer showed he'd driven 187 miles, but he was less than 10 miles from where witnesses last saw him." A chill ran through me, despite the humid afternoon air. "They found him in the car?" "No, the car was empty. Keys in the ignition, engine off, no signs of struggle. They searched the area for weeks, never found a trace." We sat in silence for a while, watching trucks pull in and out of the parking lot. Normal freight haulers living normal lives, completely unaware that something impossible was lurking out there in the storm tracks. "So what do I do?" I finally asked. "Just avoid that whole region? Never chase storms in Kansas again?" "I don't know, man." Dalton rubbed his face tiredly. "Part of me wants to say yes, play it safe, but another part—" He trailed off, looking almost embarrassed. "Another part wants to go back," I finished for him. He nodded slowly. "I've been chasing for 10 years, Cole. I've seen amazing things. Wedge tornadoes, mammotus fields that looked like alien landscapes, lightning that defied physics. But I've never seen anything that suggested the universe works differently than we think it does. This county road thing. If it's real, if Brennan was onto something, it means there are aspects of severe weather we don't understand at all. It also means people disappear," I pointed out. "Yeah, there's that." We finished our coffee and walked out to the parking lot. The western sky was building already, cumulus towers pushing up into the mid-levels. By evening, there'd be storms, probably severe. I felt the familiar pull, that urge to get in my rig and drive toward the darkness instead of away from it. "Do me a favor," Dalton said as we reached his expedition. "If you ever go back to that area during severe weather, and I know you will, because guys like us can't help ourselves, call me first. I want to document this. Proper scientific observation, multiple instruments, everything recorded. If that road appears again on radar, I want to be there." "You're insane," I said. "Look who's talking." He drove off, leaving me standing in the truck stop parking lot with a head full of questions and no good answers. I thought about Brennan, obsessed with his temporal displacement theory, ultimately driving into the very phenomenon that killed his career. I thought about those telephone poles and the shapes moving along the wires. I thought about my father's voice coming through the CB, impossibly clear. "Count the poles, Cole." Why had I needed to count them? What would have happened if I hadn't? I pushed the thoughts away and climbed back into my rig. I had a load of automotive parts bound for Omaha, a straightforward run-up I-35 with no severe weather in the forecast. Safe, normal, boring. But as I pulled onto the interstate, I couldn't stop checking my weather app, watching the radar for any sign of those characteristic thin lines. And deep down, beneath the fear and rational self-preservation, I felt anticipation. Because Dalton was right. Guys like us can't help ourselves. We always go back. The summer progressed, and I managed to avoid western Kansas entirely. I took loads through Colorado, Nebraska, even did a few runs into West Texas, but I always routed around that specific stretch of border country. Dispatch didn't question it. Truckers have preferences about routes, and as long as you deliver on time, nobody cares which roads you take. But the dreams started in July. Always the same. I'm driving on County Road 1140, watching those telephone poles flash by, counting them over and over. Sometimes I get to 51 and everything stops like before. Other times I lose count and have to start over, and the poles just keep coming, infinite, stretching into darkness. And in the worst ones, I reach the peak of that impossible incline and drive over it into the void. And I fall and fall and fall without ever hitting bottom. I'd wake up in truck stop parking lots or rest areas, sweating and disoriented, my hands cramped from gripping imaginary steering wheels. The other drivers started giving me weird looks. I lost weight. My dispatcher commented that I sounded exhausted on our calls. "You need to take some time off," she said during a check-in call in mid-August. "Seriously, Cole, you've been driving non-stop for 4 months. Take a week, get your head straight." "I'm fine," I lied, "just fighting off a cold." But I wasn't fine. The dreams were bleeding into my waking hours. I'd be cruising down I-80 or I-70, normal highway driving, and suddenly my GPS would flicker and show roads that weren't there. Just for a second. Just long enough to make me doubt what I was seeing. And my compass. I couldn't stop watching my compass. Sometimes the needle would twitch just slightly, pointing toward something that shouldn't exist. Then came the night in Salina, Kansas. I wasn't supposed to be in Kansas at all. My route should have taken me through Nebraska, well north of the danger zone. But a last-minute load came through. Premium rate, deliver by dawn. The kind you don't turn down if you want to stay on the company's good list. Drilling equipment bound for a site outside Medicine Lodge, which meant cutting straight south through Wichita and onto Highway 160. The same highway where this had all started. I told myself it would be fine. It was late August now, nearly 3 months since my incident. The weather forecast was clear. High pressure dominating the Central Plains. No severe weather expected for at least a week. Just a routine overnight haul through Kansas. I should have known better. I left Salina around 9 p.m. under a sky full of stars. The temperature had dropped into the low 70s, comfortable for driving with the windows cracked. I made good time through the small town south of I-70, the highway mostly empty except for occasional local traffic. By 11 p.m. I was approaching Wichita, the city lights glowing on the southern horizon. That's when I noticed the sky to the west. There shouldn't have been clouds. The forecast called for clear conditions all night. But there they were, a line of towering cumulus, visible even in the darkness, their tops illuminated by moonlight. I pulled over at a rest area and checked my weather app. The radar showed nothing. Clear green screen from horizon to horizon. I looked back at the western sky. The clouds were definitely there, maybe 30 miles out, and they were growing. As I watched, lightning flickered inside them. Not the branching kind, but those deep pulses that lit up the entire cloud structure. Cloud-to-cloud discharge, indicating serious electrical activity. My phone showed no weather warnings, no alerts, nothing. According to every official source, there were no storms within 200 miles. But I could see them. I could see them building and organizing, could see that characteristic anvil shape starting to form against the star field. And something else, the clouds were moving wrong. They should have been drifting east with the prevailing winds, but they were moving south, tracking parallel to my intended route. I got back in my rig and continued driving, telling myself I was imagining things. Heat exhaustion, maybe, or fatigue making me see patterns where none existed. But I couldn't stop glancing at that western horizon. Couldn't stop watching those invisible on radar storms grow and intensify. By the time I reached the Wichita bypass, the clouds covered half the sky. Still nothing on radar. Still no warnings. But I could feel the change in air pressure, could taste that pre-storm electricity. My CB radio was starting to hiss with static. I should have turned around. Should have called dispatch and told them I wasn't feeling well, needed to scrub the delivery. But the storm was still just clouds, no rain yet, and I had obligations. Plus, and I'm ashamed to admit this, part of me wanted to see what would happen. That storm-chasing instinct, that addictive need to push boundaries and test limits. So I kept driving south. The rain started just past the county line, about 10 miles from where Highway 160 branched off toward the Oklahoma border. Not a gradual buildup, but instant deluge, like someone had flipped a switch. 1 second clear highway, the next a wall of water. My wipers couldn't keep up even on maximum speed. And there, flickering on my GPS screen, was County Road 1140. It appeared exactly like before. A thin gray line branching south from Highway 160, unmarked and impossible. My GPS was already recalculating, trying to route me onto that road. I jerked the wheel slightly, overcorrecting to stay on the main highway. My tires hydroplaned for a heart-stopping second before catching traction again. The CB radio crackled to life. Follows the line, follows the line, follows the line. I grabbed the mic with shaking hands. Who is this? Identify yourself. The response was immediate. Count them, Cole. You have to count them all. My father's voice, crystal clear despite the static. Impossible. Dead 16 years and talking to me through a CB radio while I drove through a storm that didn't officially exist. This isn't real, I said out loud, to myself more than anyone. This is fatigue, hallucination, stress. But the GPS was still showing that road, and now I could see it through the rain. The same gravel turnoff, the same weathered sign. County Road 11 and 40. The road that shouldn't exist. This time, I didn't turn. I gripped the wheel and pushed past the intersection, keeping my eyes locked on the broken white lines of Highway 160. The rain intensified, hail mixing in, marble-sized at first, then growing larger, baseball-sized impacts that spiderwebbed my windshield. I should have pulled over, should have found shelter, but I kept driving, because behind me, visible in my mirrors, the road was following me. County Road 1140 wasn't staying at the intersection. It was growing, extending, pacing my rig like a predator stalking prey. I watched in my rearview as the gravel track kept pace with my 60-mile-per-hour speed, always about 100 feet behind, always matching my movements. When I accelerated, it accelerated. When I eased off, it maintained distance, and the telephone poles were sprouting up alongside it. Not being built, sprouting, growing from the ground like trees in time-lapse. Those dark shapes already moving along the wires before the poles even finished forming. My phone rang. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Turn around, Cole. My father's voice. Not filtered through CB static now, but clear and present, like he was sitting in the passenger seat. You can't outrun it. The line wants you. The line needs you. Dad? My voice cracked. How are you? Count the poles. You didn't finish counting. 51 isn't enough. There are more, so many more. Turn around and count them all. I hung up and threw the phone onto the passenger seat. This wasn't happening. This was shock, or carbon monoxide poisoning, or something rational and explainable. It wasn't. The road appeared in front of me. County Road 1140, impossibly, was now ahead on the highway. I was about to drive right through the intersection, and this time there would be no avoiding it. The gravel track stretched across Highway 160 like a barrier, those telephone poles forming a wall of wood and wire. I slammed on the brakes, felt the trailer start to fishtail, wrestled the rig back under control. I stopped maybe 10 feet from where that phantom road intersected the highway. Through the rain and hail, I could see it clearly now, solid and real and utterly impossible. The CB crackled again. You have to go back, Cole, back to where it started. The line only ends when you finish what you began. What do you want from me? I screamed into the empty cab. No answer, just the hiss of static and the rhythm of rain and that patient, waiting silence from the road ahead. I sat there for maybe 5 minutes, engine idling, the storm howling around my rig. I thought about calling Dalton, but my phone was dead again, despite having been fully charged. I thought about trying to reverse, but when I checked my mirrors, County Road 1140 had closed in behind me too. I was boxed in, trapped between two instances of the same impossible road. There was only one direction I could go. I put the transmission in gear and turned onto County Road 1140 for the second time. The change was instant and overwhelming. The rain stopped mid-fall, droplets hanging suspended in the air around my windshield. The wind ceased. The only sound was my engine and the crunch of gravel under my tires. And everywhere, pressing in from all sides, was that sense of wrongness. The feeling that I'd driven out of normal space and into somewhere else, somewhere that existed in the gaps between places. The telephone poles were different this time. Closer together, more densely packed, and the shapes on the wires were bigger, more defined. As I drove past, I could see them clearly for the first time. They weren't birds or debris or shadows. They were handprints. Hundreds of them, thousands, pressed against the wires from below, as if countless people were reaching up from underground, trying to push through from somewhere beneath the earth. My compass wasn't spinning anymore. It had locked onto something, pointing due north with unwavering precision, the needle trembling slightly with the intensity of whatever magnetic pull had captured it. Due north, toward the heart of that wrong-way rotating storm. The CB voice spoke again, but this time it wasn't my father. It was multiple voices, overlapping, all saying the same thing in eerie synchronization. "Welcome back, Cole Briggs. You shouldn't have run. The count isn't finished. 51 was just the beginning." And ahead, maybe a quarter mile up the road, I saw them. Figures standing between the telephone poles. Human-shaped but wrong. Their proportions slightly off. Their movements too fluid. They weren't blocking the road. They were just standing there watching, waiting for me to reach them. I had a choice. I could stop the rig right here, refuse to go further. But somehow I knew that wouldn't matter. This road had me now, had been trying to get me back ever since I'd escaped the first time. Running wasn't an option. So I kept driving, toward those waiting figures and the counting that hadn't finished. Toward whatever came after 51. The figures didn't move as I approached. They just stood there between the telephone poles, maybe 8 or 9 of them, their forms flickering slightly like bad video playback. I kept my foot steady on the accelerator, maintaining a cautious 20 miles per hour, every muscle in my body coiled with tension. As my headlights swept over the first figure, I saw it clearly for maybe 2 seconds. It looked like a man in his 50s wearing work clothes, denim shirt, canvas pants, heavy boots. But his features were blurred, like someone had smudged a photograph before it dried. And his eyes, where his eyes should have been, there were just dark hollows that seemed to extend further back than his skull should allow. The figure turned its head to follow my movement, but didn't step toward the road, didn't make any threatening gestures, just watched with those impossible empty eyes as I drove past. The second figure was a woman, younger, wearing what looked like a dress from the 1960s. Same blurred features, same hollow eyes. She stood perfectly still, hands at her sides, as motionless as a mannequin. I realized with cold dread that they were all wearing clothes from different eras. The third figure had on overalls and a straw hat that looked Depression-era. The fourth wore bell-bottoms and a flower-print shirt. The fifth had on a tracksuit that couldn't be older than the 1990s. These were the other drivers. The ones who'd gotten lost on County Road 1140 and never came back. These were the missing people from Brennan's research, and probably dozens more who'd never been documented. Still here, somehow, trapped between the telephone poles on a road that shouldn't exist. My CB radio crackled with those overlapping voices. "Count them, Cole. Count us. We're part of the pattern too. Everything counts. Everything is counted." I didn't want to count them, didn't want to acknowledge their existence or participate in whatever ritual was playing out. But my mouth opened anyway, and I heard myself whisper, 8, there are 8 of you. The moment I said it, they moved, not toward me, away. They turned in unison and walked between the telephone poles away from the road into the darkness beyond. Within seconds, they'd vanished, leaving only those endless lines of poles and wires and handprints. The road was rising again, that same impossible incline I'd experienced the first time. The gravel tilted upward at an angle that should have been impossible to climb, but my tires gripped like they were magnetized to the surface. The telephone poles were so close now I could have reached out and touched them if I opened the window. And the handprints on the wires were moving, sliding along the metal cables, all traveling in the same direction, north, toward whatever lay at the heart of this thing. My speedometer read 15 miles per hour, but I felt like I was barely moving. The engine was working hard, RPMs climbing, but progress was glacial. The peak of the incline was maybe 100 yards ahead, that same crest where I'd counted the poles the first time. But beyond it, I could see something new. Light. Not lightning, not headlights, not any kind of light that came from a natural source. It was pale and cold, like moonlight filtered through ice, and it was emanating from the gap in those wrong-way rotating clouds. The circular opening I'd glimpsed before was larger now, maybe 200 feet across, and through it I could see structures, geometries that hurt to perceive, angles that my brain couldn't properly process. They looked almost like buildings, or maybe bones, or maybe something between the two, massive forms that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. The CB voices were constant now, an overwhelming chorus. The line follows, the pattern follows the count. Follows the line, follows the pattern, follows the count. Stop, I shouted. Just stop talking and tell me what you want. The voices ceased instantly. For maybe 10 seconds there was perfect silence except for my laboring engine. Then a single voice spoke, clear and human and utterly devoid of emotion. We want you to finish. Finish what? The count, the sequence. The pattern has been interrupted for 54 years. You counted correctly the first time. 51 poles, one for every year since the line was closed in 1973. But you stopped. You didn't complete the sequence. You have to count backwards now, Cole. From 51 to 0. You have to uncreate what should never have been created. I don't understand. The road is a wound, a tear in the way things should be. Every storm that forms along the line pulls it open wider. Every driver who takes the wrong turn becomes part of it, bound into the pattern. The only way to close the wound is to count it closed. 51 poles forward, 51 poles backward. The sequence completes itself and the line can heal. I stared at the peak ahead, at that otherworldly light spilling through the gap in the clouds. And if I don't, then you join us. Another hollow-eyed figure between the poles waiting for the next storm, the next driver, the next failed attempt to close the wound. This is the 54th driver to try, Cole. 54 attempts over 54 years. You're our best chance in a long time. You almost finished it the first time. You can finish it now. 54 drivers. 54 people who'd tried and failed to do whatever this impossible task required. I thought about Brennan, about his research and his theories. Had he figured it out? Had he come out here and tried to count the poles, tried to close this wound in reality? Is that why he'd never been found? What happened to Dr. Brennan? I asked. A pause. Then, he counted to 47 before he lost his concentration. He's the man in the work clothes. You passed him back at the beginning. Jesus Christ. Brennan had been one of those figures, trapped here for 50 years, waiting for someone to complete what he'd started. Why me? I asked. Why am I the one who can supposedly do this? Because you're a storm chaser. You understand the patterns. You felt the pull your whole life. Your father knew it too. That's why he taught you to observe, to respect the power of severe weather. He was preparing you, even if he didn't realize it. The line called to him too, but he died before it could claim him. Now it's calling to you. Finish what he would have finished. The peak was close now, maybe 50 yards. I could see that the road continued beyond it, descending into a valley that should have been Kansas prairie but looked like something else entirely. The ground was dark and smooth, almost glassy, reflecting that cold light in fractured patterns. And in the distance, arranged in perfect lines, were more telephone poles. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. But I could count them from here. Even through the weird distortion of that light, I could see exactly how many there were. 51. Of course, there were 51. I have to drive through all of them? I asked. Count all 51 poles in reverse. Yes, but you can't just speak the numbers. You have to understand them. Feel them, know them. Each pole represents a year of wrongness, a year the wound has been open, your collapsing time, Cole, folding the years back into themselves. It takes concentration. It takes will. And if you lose count, even for a second, you start over from the beginning. I looked at my hands gripping the steering wheel. They were shaking slightly. I thought about those 8 figures I'd passed, about Brennan trapped in his work clothes for 50 years, about 53 other drivers who'd failed to complete this count. What happens if I succeed? I asked. The wound closes. County Road 1140 ceases to exist in any meaningful sense. It becomes just another patch of prairie, indistinguishable from the surrounding terrain. The storms stop forming the wrong way. The temporal distortions end. Everyone trapped here, all 54 of us, can finally move on. And what happens to me? A longer pause this time. Then quietly, we don't know. No one has ever succeeded. But you'll either emerge back onto Highway 160 exactly where you turned off, or you become the 55th figure between the poles. There's no middle ground, Cole. You either close the wound completely or you fail completely. Those are the only 2 outcomes. I'd reached the peak. My rig crested the impossible incline and started down into that valley of wrong light and dark earth. The 51 telephone poles stretched ahead of me, evenly spaced, waiting to be counted backward. 51 to 0. Uncreating each year of wrongness, collapsing the temporal wound, healing the tear in reality. No pressure or anything. I took a deep breath and started driving down into the valley. The descent felt like falling, even though I was in complete control of the rig. My stomach dropped, that roller coaster sensation of gravity shifting. The cold light was all around me now, playing across my windshield in patterns that looked almost like writing in languages I couldn't read. I passed the first pole. The handprints on its wires were pressed so hard against the metal that the wires were bending under the pressure, creating harmonics that sang in frequencies that made my teeth ache. 51, I said aloud, making my voice strong and clear. Year 51 of the wound. The moment I spoke, something shifted. The light dimmed slightly and the handprints on that pole's wires vanished. The wires straightened, the harmonics ceased. It was working. I kept driving, maintaining that steady 20 miles per hour. The second pole approached. 50, I said. Year 50. Another shift, more handprints vanishing. The light dimming incrementally. 49, year 49. Pole after pole, I counted backward through time. The process was harder than I'd expected. It wasn't just speaking numbers. I had to focus on each one, had to feel its weight and significance. Each count was an act of will, pushing back against the wound's desire to remain open. 48, year 48. I thought of Brennan making it this far, losing his concentration, becoming trapped. What had distracted him? What had broken his focus? 47, year 47. The figures were appearing between the poles now, watching my progress. 8 became 16. 16 became 32. All the lost drivers gathering to witness what might be their release. Their hollow eyes tracked my movement with desperate hope. 46, year 46. My arms were starting to ache from gripping the wheel so tightly. The valley around me was changing, becoming less solid, more fluid. The dark earth rippled like water disturbed by wind. Those structures I'd seen through the gap in the clouds were becoming more visible, looming larger, their impossible geometries pressing down on my perception. 45, year 45. Halfway done, keep going. 44, year 44. The CB radio erupted with sound. Not voices this time, but music. Old country music, the kind my dad used to listen to. Hank Williams singing about lost highways and lonely nights. I almost smiled at the recognition before I realized what was happening. It was a distraction. The wound was trying to break my concentration, make me lose count. I kept my eyes fixed on the road ahead and forced my attention back to the poles. 43, year 43. The music grew louder, other voices joining in. People talking, laughing, crying. Every sound I'd ever heard on CB radio over 7 years of storm chasing, all overlapping into cacophony. 42, year 42. I turned the CB off, but the voices continued, coming from everywhere now. The trailer rattled with phantom impacts. My mirrors showed things that couldn't exist. Other vehicles, other storms, other versions of County Road 1140 branching off in impossible directions. 41, year 41. Focus, Cole. Just focus on the count. 40, year 40. The trapped drivers were walking alongside my rig now, keeping pace despite my speed. Their mouths were moving, trying to tell me something, but I couldn't hear them over the chaos of sounds. I didn't want to hear them. Anything that broke my concentration was a threat. 39, year 39. My phone was ringing. My dead phone with no battery was ringing, my father's photo on the screen. I grabbed it without thinking and answered. Cole, Dad's voice, as clear as if he were standing next to me. Cole, you need to stop. This isn't safe. You're going to get yourself killed. You're not real, I said, keeping my eyes on the poles. You're just another distraction. I'm real enough to worry about my son driving into something that is going to destroy him. Pull over. Turn around. This isn't your fight. Dad, I have to do this. No, you don't. You have a choice, just like you've always had a choice. You chose to chase storms. You chose to take this route. Now, choose to walk away while you still can. My hands tightened on the wheel. Part of me, a large part, wanted to listen. Wanted to slam on the brakes and figure out some other way out of this nightmare. But I'd seen those figures between the poles, seen the hope in their hollow eyes. 54 people trapped for decades, waiting for someone to finish what Brennan had started. I'm sorry, Dad, I said. I have to keep counting. I hung up and threw the phone aside. 38, I said through gritted teeth. Year 38. The phone kept ringing. My father kept calling. I ignored it and focused everything I had on the poles ahead. 37. Year 37. The trapped drivers were reaching out now, their hands coming through my windows like they existed in multiple states of matter. Their fingers brushed my arms, my face, cold as ice and desperate. But their touch wasn't hostile, it was pleading. They wanted me to succeed so badly it hurt to feel. 36, year 36, 35, year 35. 2/3 done. Keep going. 34, year 34. The structures beyond the clouds were right above me now, so vast and complex that looking at them made my vision swim, They were the source of the light, I realized. Massive constructions of energy and matter that existed in dimensions I couldn't properly perceive. The wound had opened a channel to something else, somewhere else, and these things had been slowly pushing through for 54 years. 33. Year 33. If I succeeded, these things would be pushed back. The channel would close. Whatever had been seeping into our reality through this tear would be expelled. No wonder the wound fought so hard to stay open. 32. Year 32. My windshield cracked, a spiderweb of fractures spreading across the glass. Not from impact, from pressure. The air around my rig was getting denser, heavier, like I was driving underwater. My engine started laboring harder, struggling against resistance that shouldn't exist. 31. Year 31. 30. Year 30. Breathing was difficult now. Each inhale felt like sucking air through a wet cloth. The cold light was so bright it hurt to look at, but I couldn't close my eyes or I'd miss the poles. Had to keep counting, had to keep moving forward. 29. Year 29. The road beneath me was dissolving. I could see through the gravel to whatever lay underneath, and what I saw made no sense. Layers upon layers of reality, stacked and folded and compressed, each layer showing a different version of this moment. In some layers my rig was whole, in others it was twisted wreckage. In some I was alone. In others the cab was crowded with the transparent forms of other drivers who'd tried and failed. 28. Year 28. My father's voice again, but different now. Cole, please. I can't watch this happen. Not to my son. Stop while you still... You're not my father, I screamed. My father died 16 years ago, and he never would have asked me to abandon people who need help. Silence, then quietly. You're right, I'm not your father. I'm the echo of what your father might have been if he'd driven this road instead of you. I'm the version of him that exists in the spaces between moments. And I'm asking you to fail, Cole, because if you succeed, I cease to exist along with all the other echoes. We're part of the wound now. We're sustained by it. Closing it kills us. Then I'm sorry, I said. But you were never supposed to exist in the first place. 27. Year 27. The echo fell silent. I kept counting. 26. Year 26. 25. Year 25. Halfway through the second set. Almost there. 24. Year 24. My trailer was starting to come apart. I could hear rivets popping, metal panels peeling away. The load I'd been carrying, those drilling components bound for Medicine Lodge, was spilling out onto the dark earth behind me. I watched in my mirrors as the equipment tumbled and then vanished, absorbed into the dissolving road. 23. Year 23. 22. Year 22. The trapped drivers were fading now, becoming more transparent with each count. They were starting to move on, released from their binding by my progress. I saw Brennan's work-clothed figure lift his hand in what might have been a wave or a blessing before he dispersed into motes of light. 21. Year 21. Only 20 more to go. My rig was barely holding together, and I wasn't sure I was in much better shape. My vision was going dark at the edges. My lungs burned. My heart was doing things hearts probably shouldn't do. But I kept counting. 20. Year 20. 19. Year 19. 18. Year 18. Each count was harder than the last. The numbers wanted to slip out of order, to jumble themselves in my mouth. 17 or 70. 16 or 60. I had to concentrate so hard on each individual number that the world around me became just a blur of light and darkness. 17. Year 17. 16. Year 16. My father's age when I was born. I thought about him teaching me to respect storms, to observe and appreciate their power. Had he known, somehow? Had he sensed that his son would someday need these lessons for something much stranger than simple weather appreciation? 15. Year 15. 14. Year 14. 13. Year 13. My phone stopped ringing. The voices on the CB ceased. The pressure around my rig began to ease slightly. The wound was accepting defeat, preparing to close. Just a few more counts. 12. Year 12. 11. Year 11. 10. Year 10. Single digits now. So close. 9. Year 9. 8. Year 8. The structures above me were receding, pulling back through the gap in the clouds. That cold light was dimming. The dark earth was solidifying back into normal prairie soil. 7. Year 7. 6. Year 6. 5. Year 5. The telephone poles behind me were vanishing as I passed them, erasing themselves from existence. The wound was collapsing inward, following my count, sealing itself year by year. 4. Year 4. 3. Year 3. 2. Year 2. One pole left, the final count, the moment that would either free me or trap me forever. I took a deep breath and looked ahead to that last telephone pole. It stood alone now, the only marker left in a valley that was rapidly returning to normal Kansas prairie. And between my rig and that pole, maybe 20 feet, I saw one last figure. It was me. Another version of me, slightly translucent, wearing the same clothes, driving the same rig. This was the version that would exist if I failed. The 55th trapped driver, waiting for the next attempt, the next chance. We locked eyes through the windshield. The ghost me mouthed something I couldn't hear, but understood perfectly. Don't stop. I didn't. 1, I said, my voice strong and clear despite everything. Year 1. And I drove through that final pole. The transition was instant and violent. One moment I was in that valley of wrong light and dissolving reality. The next I was hydroplaning across rain-slicked asphalt, my rig skidding sideways as I fought for control. Highway 160. Normal, real, beautiful Highway 160. I wrestled the wheel, felt the trailer start to jackknife, pumped the brakes carefully to avoid locking up. The rig straightened out, speed dropping, tires finally catching traction. I came to a stop, straddling both lanes, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Rain drummed on what was left of my windshield. The cracks from the otherworldly pressure had somehow remained, spiderwebbing across the glass in patterns that almost looked intentional. But it was normal rain, falling from normal storm clouds, part of a normal Kansas thunderstorm moving through on a normal August night. I looked at my clock, 11:47 p.m. According to my GPS, I'd turned onto County Road 1140 at 11:34 p.m. 13 minutes, that's all it had been. 13 minutes to count through 54 years of temporal wound and close a tear in reality. My phone buzzed. Actually buzzed, not phantom rang. A text from dispatch. Cole, your showing stopped on 160. Everything okay? My hands were shaking too badly to type a response. I managed to thumbs up the message and pulled my rig onto the shoulder, out of the way of any traffic. Not that there was any. The highway was empty in both directions. Just rain and darkness and the comfortable isolation of a Midwest storm. I climbed out of the cab on unsteady legs and walked around to inspect the damage. My windshield was cracked but intact. My trailer was impossibly completely fine. Those panels I'd heard peeling away, that cargo I'd watched spilling onto the dark earth, all of it was right where it should be, secured, undamaged, ready to deliver. The only evidence of my journey was the windshield and a thin layer of dust on my tires. Not dirt or mud or gravel. Dust. Fine, pale dust that didn't match anything in the Kansas soil profile. I touched it with my finger and it dissolved instantly, leaving no residue. I looked west, toward where County Road 1140 should have been. Nothing. Just empty prairie stretching toward low hills, no structures, no roads, no telephone poles. The storm was breaking up, the clouds fragmenting and dispersing. Whatever atmospheric conditions had allowed that wound to open now, dissipating into normal weather patterns. My CB radio crackled. Just normal static now. No voices or breathing, or impossible music. I got back in the cab and checked my GPS. County Road 1140 was gone from the map completely. Not just unmapped, but the area where it had been shown was now blank prairie, coded green to indicate no roads, no structures, no human development. I pulled up my weather app. The radar showed the dying remains of a garden-variety thunderstorm. Nothing unusual, nothing impossible. No thin lines, no ghost echoes, no meteorological anomalies that would make atmospheric scientists scratch their heads. And I knew with absolute certainty that County Road 1140 was gone forever. I called Dalton. He answered on the second ring, groggy and confused. "Cole? Jesus, it's almost midnight. What's going on?" "I closed it," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Hoarse, distant, like someone talking after a long illness. "The road, the wound, I closed it." "What? What are you talking about?" "I'm on Highway 160, about 20 miles south of Wichita. I just drove County Road 1140 and counted it closed. Brennan was right about everything. The temporal displacement, the electromagnetic interference, all of it. It was real." A long pause. I could hear Dalton sitting up, becoming fully alert. "Cole, are you okay? You sound—" "I'm fine. I'm more than fine. Dalton, I need you to check something. Pull up the NOAA radar archive for August 23rd, tonight, between 11:30 and 11:50 p.m. Tell me what you see." I heard him typing, clicking through databases. "Okay, looking at it now. There was a line of storms through central Kansas, pretty much done now. Nothing unusual that I can—" He stopped. "Wait, there's a note here. Radar anomaly at 11:34 p.m., a brief linear echo that appeared and then vanished. Meteorologists are calling it a processing error." "It wasn't an error," I said. "That was the road. That was me driving through it." "Cole, what the hell happened out there?" So I told him everything from the moment the road appeared on my GPS to the final count and the transition back to normal reality. I told him about the trapped drivers and the structures beyond the clouds and the version of my father that had tried to make me fail. I told him about Brennan standing between the poles in his work clothes, about counting backward through 54 years of wrongness. When I finished, Dalton was quiet for a long time. "You know how crazy this sounds, right?" "I know. But check the archives. Find Brennan's paper and look at the incident list. I guarantee you there won't be any more reports after tonight. No more missing drivers, no more temporal distortions, no more impossible storms. It's done." "I believe you," Dalton said softly. "I don't understand it, but I believe you. What are you going to do now?" "Deliver my load to Medicine Lodge. File my mileage report. Get my windshield fixed. Try to process what just happened. You should get checked out. Make sure you're okay." "I'm okay," I said. And I meant it. Despite everything, despite the terror and the impossibility and the close brush with becoming the 55th trapped driver, I felt okay. Better than okay. I felt like I'd accomplished something that mattered. Something that transcended normal freight hauling and storm chasing and the routine grind of long-distance trucking. I'd closed a wound in the world. I'd freed people who'd been trapped for decades. I'd finished what Brennan had started. "Keep this between us," I told Dalton. Nobody else needs to know what really happened. As far as anyone's concerned, I just drove through a normal storm and got some hail damage. Agreed, but Cole, if anything like this happens again, it won't, I'm sure of it. That wound was unique, a one-time glitch in the atmospheric physics of severe weather. It took 54 years to partially heal on its own. Now that it's fully closed, it won't reopen. We said our goodbyes, and I ended the call. I sat in my idling truck for a few more minutes, watching the storm clouds break apart and reveal stars behind them. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving that fresh petrichor smell and the sound of water dripping from power lines. Normal power lines. Real power lines. No handprints, no dark shapes, no impossible movements. I pulled back onto Highway 160 and continued south, making good time on empty roads. I delivered my load to Medicine Lodge just as the sun was coming up, right on schedule despite the detour through impossible space. The site manager signed for the drilling equipment without comment on my cracked windshield. In storm country, everyone understood that hail damage was an occupational hazard. I filed my report, collected my pay, found a truck stop with a shower and real food. I slept for 12 hours straight, dreamless sleep undisturbed by telephone poles or counting, or my father's voice asking me to turn back. When I woke up, I checked my email and found a message from Dalton with an attachment. He'd pulled Brennan's original research paper and the incident database. As I'd predicted, the list of temporal distortions and missing drivers ended in 1974 with Brennan himself. After that, nothing. Not a single report in 50 years. Until last night, when the wound finally closed. Dalton had included a scanned copy of Brennan's last journal entry, dated May 12, 1974. I believe I've finally determined the mechanism by which temporal displacement occurs along County Road 1140. The combination of rotating mesocyclones and specific mineral compositions in the soil creates a resonance effect that literally tears small holes in space-time. These tears persist because they exist in a feedback loop. Each new storm strengthens them, and their presence influences storm formation, creating more opportunities for expansion. I've calculated that the only way to close such a tear would be to reverse the resonance. Essentially, count backward through the temporal accumulation, collapsing each year of the wound's existence in sequence. The process would require extraordinary focus and willpower, as the wound itself will resist closure. I estimate the failure rate would be catastrophically high. Tomorrow, I'm going to attempt it myself. If you're reading this and I've failed, know that I tried. And know that someday, someone will succeed. Someone who understands storms not just as meteorological phenomena, but as moments of terrible beauty. Someone who can hold concentration in the face of the impossible. I pray that person finds this research and finishes what I'm about to start. I read the entry 3 times, feeling a strange connection across 50 years to a man I'd never met. Brennan had known what he was getting into. He'd understood the risks and tried anyway because it was the right thing to do. And he'd been right about one more thing. It had taken someone who understood storms as both science and something more. A storm chaser trucker, someone who spent their life threading the needle between danger and exhilaration, who knew how to hold course when every instinct screamed to run. I closed the email and started my truck. I had another load waiting, another route to drive, another opportunity to chase weather while getting paid for it. Life continued, as it always did. But sometimes, late at night when storms build on the western horizon, I think about County Road 1140. About the 54 drivers who were trapped there for decades, and the wound that almost claimed a 55th. About my father's voice asking me to turn back, and the impossible structures pressing through from somewhere else. And I think about the fact that, despite all evidence to the contrary, despite the closed wound and the absence of new incidents, I sometimes still see it on my GPS. Just for a second, just a flicker in the corner of the screen. A thin gray line branching off from whatever highway I'm on, unnamed and impossible. It appears most often during severe weather. During those perfect atmospheric setups when the sky goes green and the wall clouds rotate and the air tastes like electricity and ozone. When the storms are their most beautiful and most terrible, the line appears and my GPS tries to route me onto it, and I always ignore it and stay on the main road. Because I know the truth now. County Road 1140 might be closed, but the potential for such wounds exists wherever the right conditions align. Wherever storms touch down with sufficient intensity and the underlying geology creates the perfect resonance. The wounds can be healed, but new ones can open. And somewhere out there, driving through the storm tracks of the Great Plains, there are other truckers like me, other storm chasers who feel that same pull toward severe weather, that same need to witness the atmosphere's terrible power. Some of them will be smart and stay on the main highways, but some of them will see those phantom roads appear on their GPS. They'll feel that irresistible compulsion to take the turn, to see where those impossible routes lead. And if they're not careful, if they don't understand what they're getting into, they'll become the next generation of hollow-eyed figures standing between telephone poles that shouldn't exist. I can't stop them. I can't warn them all. The storm-chasing community is vast and decentralized, and besides, who would believe me if I told them? I'd sound insane, just another driver who'd spent too many hours on lonely highways with nothing but the wind for company. All I can do is keep driving, keep watching, keep being ready. Because if I see that thin line appear on radar again, if I hear reports of missing drivers or temporal distortions or storms that rotate the wrong way, I'll know what it means. Another wound has opened, another sequence needs to be completed, and this time, I'll know exactly how to close it. But for now, the roads are clear and the storms are normal, and the freight keeps flowing from city to city, state to state. I chase supercells when I can, document them with my phone camera, post the good footage to social media for other weather enthusiasts. I'm just another storm chaser trucker living a slightly unusual but fundamentally normal life. Except sometimes, late at night, I count telephone poles as I drive past them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I count them compulsively, unconsciously, the numbers running through my head like a mantra or a prayer. And I never, ever get to 51 before I force myself to stop. Because I know what happens when you reach 51 and keep going. I know where that road leads. And while I closed one wound, while I freed 54 trapped souls and prevented a 55th from joining them, I also know the truth that Brennan discovered, and that I learned the hard way. Some roads should never be driven. Some counts should never be completed. And some storms, the really big ones, the ones that rotate the wrong way and open gaps in the clouds to show you things that shouldn't exist. Those storms are looking for specific people. They're looking for people like me. People who understand the patterns and feel the pull and can hold concentration in the face of impossible terror. The wound I closed was one of many, I'm sure of it. And the storms know there are people out there capable of closing them. So, the storms hunt for us, wait for us, draw us in with phantom roads and familiar voices, and the promise of witnessing something extraordinary. I escaped County Road 1140. I closed the wound and lived to drive another day. But some nights, when the conditions are perfect and the sky is cooking something nasty, I wonder if the next wound will find me. If somewhere out there on some lonely highway, in some impossible storm, another thin gray line is appearing on my GPS, waiting patiently for me to make the wrong turn. And I wonder if next time I'll have the strength to ignore it. Or if the pull will be too strong, and I'll turn onto that phantom road once more, counting telephone poles that shouldn't exist, driving into storms that rotate the wrong way, racing against time to close wounds that threaten to tear reality apart. I don't know the answer. All I know is this. I keep driving, I keep watching, and I keep my CB radio on Channel 19, listening for voices that might or might not be real, counting things I might or might not be able to see. Because County Road 1140 might be gone, but the world is full of storm-damaged highways and electromagnetic anomalies and people who take the wrong turn at the wrong time. And somewhere out there, on some rain-slicked road under some impossible sky, another driver is about to make the same choice I made. I just hope they count better than the 54 who came before me. I hope they reach 51 and know to count backward. I hope they make it home. Because the storms are always building, the wounds are always waiting to open, and the line, that impossible, beautiful, terrible line, follows the pattern, follows the count, follows the line, follows the pattern, follows the count. Forever and ever and ever. The last thing I ever did regarding County Road 1140 was return to the Harper County Records Office 1 year later. I wanted to confirm that the road really was gone, that my count had actually worked. The same clerk was there. She didn't recognize me at first, but when I mentioned the road, her expression changed. "You were the one who asked about it last year," she said. "The trucker who claimed to have driven on it." "That's me. I just wanted to verify something. Has there been any activity related to that area in the past 12 months? Any incidents, any reports, anything unusual?" She pulled up her computer and searched through records. Nothing, 0 reports. But there was something strange. She frowned at her screen. About 6 months ago, a survey crew went out to that area to update land use maps. They reported finding an old sign lying in the grass. Just a beat-up road sign with no writing on it anymore, weathered and rusted. They turned it into the County Historical Society. "Can I see it?" She made a phone call, and 20 minutes later I was standing in a dusty storage room of the County Historical Building, looking at a rectangular piece of metal that had once been a road sign. The paint was almost completely gone, but I could still make out ghost traces of letters. County Road 1140. "We don't know how old this is," the Historical Society curator told me. "Could be from the 60s or 70s. The metal composition suggests it's older than our current signage. But here's the weird part. When we tested the material, we found trace elements that don't match any metal alloys used in road signs. Ever. Not in any era." "What kind of elements?" She showed me the analysis report. Complex molecular structures, unusual isotopes, materials that looked almost like they'd been subjected to intense electromagnetic fields or extreme temperatures or both simultaneously. Materials that had been warped by contact with something that shouldn't exist. I thanked her and left, my mind spinning. The road was gone. The wound was closed. But artifacts remained. Physical proof that County Road 1140 had been real. Had been more than just a radar anomaly or a mass hallucination or a glitch in GPS systems. The storms had marked reality, scarred it, and even though the wound had healed, the scars remained. I never went back to Harper County again. I reroute around it automatically now, taking slightly longer paths that keep me safely distant from whatever might still linger in that stretch of Kansas prairie. Because I know the truth that Brennan discovered, that 54 other drivers learned too late, and that I barely survived understanding. The storms are alive in ways we don't comprehend. They hunt, they remember, they leave marks on the world that persist long after the rain stops and the clouds clear. And if you're the kind of person who chases storms, who drives into danger instead of away from it, who feels that irresistible pull towards severe weather, then the storms will find you eventually. They'll show you roads that shouldn't exist. They'll ask you to count things that shouldn't be counted. And they'll test whether you have the strength to close wounds that threaten to tear reality apart. I passed that test once, but the storms are patient, and the roads are long, and somewhere out there in the lightning-split darkness of a Great Plains supercell, another thin gray line is appearing on someone's GPS. Another driver is making the wrong turn. Another count is beginning, and I can only hope they're ready for what comes next. Because County Road 1140 is gone, but the storm that created it is eternal, and it's always, always looking for the next driver to test. The next person willing to drive into the impossible, count the uncountable, and face the terrible beauty of storms that rotate the wrong way. That person might be you. That person might be anyone. But whoever it is, I hope they remember this. Count the poles. All of them. Forward to 51, backward to 0. Don't stop. Don't look away. Don't lose concentration. And whatever you do, no matter what voices you hear or what you see moving on those wires or what impossible things press through from beyond, keep counting. Your life, and the lives of everyone else trapped in temporal wounds across the storm-scarred plains, depends on it. Keep counting until the wound closes. Keep counting until you reach home. Keep counting until the storm finally lets you go. And then, when you're safely back on normal roads, under normal skies, remember what you saw and what you did. Remember, but don't tell anyone who wouldn't understand, because the storms are listening, and they're always, always recruiting. My name is Mason Hartley, and I've been running freight through Colorado's Front Range for 9 years. The money's good if you know how to handle mountain grades and sudden weather changes, and I've always prided myself on being one of the better drivers in the regional circuit. But more than the paycheck, I live for the storms that roll off the Rockies during spring and summer. Those violent, unpredictable cells that can drop golf ball-sized hail one minute and produce tornadoes the next. I'm what you'd call a storm chaser, though I do it differently than the tourist crowd with their minivans and GoPros. I chase from behind the wheel of a Kenworth W900, 48 feet of trailer loaded with whatever cargo needs moving. It's dangerous, yeah, but I've got good instincts and better equipment. Dual radar apps, real-time lightning data, a CB radio that picks up chatter from every weather spotter within 50 miles. I know what I'm doing, or at least I thought I did. June 14th started normal enough. I picked up a load of industrial refrigeration units in Denver. Destination was a meat packing facility outside Sterling, about 125 miles northeast. The manifest showed 28,000 pounds, well within my rig's capacity. I signed the paperwork, did my pre-trip inspection, and pulled out of the depot around 2:30 p.m. The sky was already showing promise. Towering cumulus was building over the Palmer Divide, those characteristic anvil tops spreading out as the afternoon heat fueled convection. By the time I merged onto I-76, heading northeast, the Storm Prediction Center had issued a severe thunderstorm watch for the entire region. Large hail, damaging winds, isolated tornadoes possible. Perfect conditions. I've been chasing storms since I was a teenager. My older brother Wyatt got me into it. He was obsessed with severe weather, spent every spring glued to radar screens and weather forums. We'd drive out into the plains together, park on dirt roads, and watch supercells organize against the darkening sky. Wyatt died in a motorcycle accident when I was 19. Nothing to do with storms, just bad timing and a drunk driver. But the storm chasing stayed with me. It was our thing, the bond we'd shared, and continuing it felt like keeping a piece of him alive. I called it meditation. Some people do yoga, some people fish. I drive toward rotating updrafts and watch lightning strike close enough to feel the electromagnetic pulse in my teeth. The drive from Denver to Sterling is straightforward under normal conditions. You basically follow I-76 as it cuts northeast across the high plains, passing through small towns like Brighton and Fort Morgan. But I wasn't taking the interstate all the way. I'd been monitoring the radar since leaving Denver, and a particularly nasty cell was organizing about 40 miles north of my route, near the town of Brush. It was showing all the characteristics of a significant hail producer: strong rotation, high echo tops, and that distinctive bounded weak echo region that indicates a massive updraft. That's where the big hail forms. Frozen precipitation gets caught in the updraft, cycling up and down through layers of supercooled water, adding layer after layer of ice until the stones are too heavy to stay suspended. Then they fall, sometimes reaching the size of softballs, occasionally even larger. Hail cores are beautiful and terrifying. The way the ice refracts light, the sound of stones impacting metal and earth, the sheer kinetic energy of millions of frozen projectiles falling from the sky, it's hypnotic and dangerous as hell. Most truckers avoid hail cores. They'll pull over and wait it out, or reroute around the storms entirely. The damage to a rig can run into thousands of dollars: dented panels, shattered windows, destroyed cargo. Insurance covers some of it, but you still take a hit on your safety rating and your schedule. I've driven through maybe a dozen hail cores over the years. Not straight through the center, I'm not suicidal, but close enough to experience the edges, to feel that adrenaline surge as marble-sized stones ping off the hood and windshield. You have to know your limits, know when to push and when to back off. It's a game of calculated risk. This particular cell looked like it would cross Highway 34 somewhere between Brush and Fort Morgan around 4 o'clock p.m. If I timed it right, I could take the exit at Fort Morgan, head north on a county road, and intercept the storm as it moved southeast. I'd see the structure, maybe catch some lightning, experience the forward flank without getting hammered by the core itself. I pulled off at Fort Morgan and topped off my fuel. The sky to the north was ominous, dark gray-green base, that sickly color that means the atmosphere's loaded with moisture and hail. I could see the rain shaft in the distance, maybe 20 miles out, and occasional flashes of lightning illuminated the cloud structure. Beautiful. A guy at the pump next to me, driving a beat-up Silverado, watched me checking the sky. "You heading north?" he asked. "That's the plan. That's a bad storm. Just heard on the radio they're reporting baseball-sized hail near Hillrose. You might want to wait it out." "Appreciate the warning," I said, "but I've got a schedule to keep." He shook his head. "Your funeral, man." I finished fueling and pulled onto Highway 34, heading east for about 2 miles before turning north on County Road 29. This was farm country. Flat prairie broken up by irrigation circles and scattered homesteads. The road was well-maintained gravel, straight as an arrow, perfect for storm observing. I could see for miles in every direction. The cell was moving fast now, that rain shaft spreading wider as it approached. I pulled over about 4 miles north of the highway and killed the engine, stepping out into the humid air. The temperature had dropped maybe 10 degrees in the last 20 minutes, storm outflow pushing cooler air ahead of the system. The wind was picking up too, gusting from the north, carrying the smell of rain and ozone. I grabbed my phone and started recording. This was going to be spectacular. The forward flank hit about 3 minutes later. First came the wind, strong, steady, bending the prairie grass nearly horizontal. Then the rain, fat drops that stung when they hit exposed skin. And finally, the hail. Pea-sized at first, bouncing off the ground like popcorn, then rapidly increasing to marble-sized, then larger. I got back in the cab as quarter-sized stones started falling. They hammered the roof and hood with that distinctive metallic clang, hundreds of impacts per second, creating a continuous roar. Through the windshield, I could see the hail shaft advancing, a solid white wall maybe a quarter-mile wide, moving across the prairie like a combine harvester made of ice. The stones hitting my rig were getting bigger, golf ball-sized now, leaving dimples in the aluminum panels. This was the fringe of the core, and it was already more intense than I'd expected. The radar on my phone showed the storm's structure, that classic supercell hook echo with the hail core forming the southern edge of the circulation. I was positioned perfectly to observe without getting completely demolished. Or so I thought. That's when I saw the other truck. It appeared maybe half a mile ahead of me, barely visible through the hail and rain. Red taillights cutting through the white curtain, steady and bright. Another semi heading north on the same county road, driving straight toward the core. My first thought was concern. Whoever was driving that rig was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. The hail was already severe at my location, and they were heading directly into the worst of it. Even with the best equipment, driving through baseball-sized hail could be catastrophic. Shattered windshields, damaged engines, destroyed cargo, not to mention the danger of losing visibility and driving off the road. I grabbed my CB mic. This is Storm Chaser to the northbound semi on County Road 29. You're heading into a severe hail core. Recommend you pull over and wait it out. Over. Static. No response. I tried again. Northbound semi, this is Storm Chaser on your 6. That hail gets any bigger and you're looking at serious damage. Find a spot to park it. Over. Still nothing. Maybe their radio was off. Or maybe they couldn't hear me over the roar of hail impacting their rig. I watched through my windshield as those red taillights continued north, unwavering, heading deeper into the white wall. The professional thing would have been to let them go. They were an adult making their own decisions, and I had my own rig to worry about. But something about those lights bothered me. They were too steady, too consistent. In hail this severe, a driver would be constantly adjusting speed, maybe even swerving to avoid the largest stones. But those lights just maintained a perfect line, perfect speed, disappearing gradually into the core. I made a decision that I'd spend the next year regretting. I started my engine and followed them. The hail intensified immediately. Baseball-sized stones now, impacting with enough force to spiderweb my windshield in multiple places. The sound was deafening, like being inside a steel drum while someone attacked it with hammers. I turned my wipers on maximum, but they were nearly useless. All I could see was white. Hail falling so thick it blocked out everything else, but I could still see those red taillights ahead. They were maybe a quarter mile in front of me now, still maintaining that steady northward trajectory. I focused on them, using their position as a guide through the zero visibility conditions. My phone's radar app was going crazy. The hail core was showing returns in the 65-70 dBz range, indicating stones potentially the size of softballs. I was driving through conditions that should have been impossible to navigate, following a truck that seemed completely unfazed by the apocalyptic weather. A particularly large stone hit my windshield dead center, creating a crater in the glass. Cracks radiated outward like lightning, blocking my view. I leaned to the left, trying to see through an undamaged section, my hands tight on the wheel. This was insane. I should pull over, should wait out the core, should... The taillights ahead flickered. Not like a normal brake light or turn signal. They pulsed, both lights simultaneously, like someone had momentarily cut power to the entire electrical system. 1 second they were there, solid and red. The next, they dimmed to almost nothing. Then they came back at full brightness. I blinked, thinking maybe it was my vision playing tricks in the hail-induced chaos. But it happened again, both lights pulsing in perfect synchronization. Off, on, Not random electrical failure, deliberate, patterned. 3 short pulses, 3 long pulses, 3 short pulses. SOS. Someone in that truck was signaling for help. I pressed harder on the accelerator, my rig groaning under the assault of hail but responding. The gap between us closed. 200 yards, 150, 100. The pulsing continued, that SOS pattern repeating over and over. But as I got closer, I started to notice other details that made my skin crawl. The truck's trailer wasn't taking damage. At least it didn't appear to be. Through the gaps in the hail, I could catch glimpses of the rig ahead, and its panels were pristine. No dents, no marks, no evidence that it was being pummeled by ice stones traveling at terminal velocity. My own trailer was getting destroyed. I could hear panels buckling, rivets popping, but that truck ahead looked like it had just rolled off the assembly line. 50 yards. The taillights were so bright now they hurt to look at, almost supernaturally vivid against the white hail backdrop. And I realized something else that didn't make sense. I couldn't see the stones hitting the truck. The hail was impacting the ground around it, bouncing off the road surface, but in the immediate area around the vehicle there was a gap, like the hail was avoiding it, like there was an invisible bubble protecting it from the storm. 25 yards. I was right behind them now, close enough to read the license plate if visibility had been better. The SOS pattern continued. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short, but faster now, more urgent. And underneath the taillights I could see something else. The mud flaps on the rear of the trailer, the kind with Chrome Girls or company logos. These ones had text, though I couldn't quite make it out through the hail. 10 yards. Close enough to see clearly, close enough to wish I hadn't. The mud flaps read, "If you can read this, you're too close." Standard trucker humor, but underneath that in smaller text, "Turn back while you still can." That wasn't standard. That wasn't humor. That was a warning. The taillights stopped pulsing and went completely dark, just like that. Full brightness to absolute nothing in an instant. No fade, no flicker, just gone. And in the same moment, the hail stopped. Not gradually, not tapering off. It just stopped mid-fall. I looked through my shattered windshield and saw hailstones suspended in the air, motionless like someone had hit pause on the storm. Thousands of ice spheres, ranging from marble-sized to baseball-sized, hanging perfectly still in space. My rig was still rolling forward, about 15 miles per hour, coasting toward where the other truck should have been, but the taillights were gone, and in the sudden, eerie silence I couldn't hear another engine. The suspended hailstones started to rotate. Not fall. Rotate. They turned in place, all of them simultaneously orienting toward some point above and ahead of me. And then they began to orbit, slowly at first but rapidly accelerating, creating a vortex of ice that spiraled around an empty point in space where the other truck had been. I hit the brakes. My rig slowed, tires crunching on the layer of hail that had already fallen. But I couldn't stop looking at that vortex, couldn't process what I was seeing. The hailstones were moving in perfect coordination, like they were being controlled, like they were part of some larger pattern I couldn't fully perceive, and then they fell. All at once, the stones dropped straight down with a sound like a million windows shattering. They hit the ground and the road and the fields in a single devastating impact. And when the dust and ice crystals cleared, I could see what lay ahead. The other truck was gone. Completely gone. No taillights, no tire tracks, no indication that it had ever been there. The road stretched empty and straight for miles, undamaged gravel reflecting the gray light from the breaking storm clouds. I sat in my idling rig, breathing hard, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The storm was moving away now, the rain shaft tracking southeast, the hail core dissipating as it lost energy. Within minutes, the sky began to clear, that characteristic post-storm light filtering through gaps in the clouds. I looked at my phone. The radar showed the cell continuing its path, already breaking apart. Nothing unusual, nothing to indicate the impossible thing I'd just witnessed. Just a garden-variety severe thunderstorm doing what severe thunderstorms do, dumping hail and rain and then moving on. I got out of my cab on unsteady legs and walked forward, examining the road where the other truck had been. There should have been tire marks at minimum. Wet gravel shows tracks clearly, and a fully loaded semi leaves distinct impressions. But the road was smooth, undisturbed except for the scattered hailstones and my own tire tracks leading up from the south. It was like the truck had never existed. I walked maybe 100 yards north, searching for any evidence. A drop bolt, a piece of tire tread, anything. The hail had left its mark on the landscape. Shredded crops, dented irrigation equipment, small branches torn from trees. But of the semi I'd been following, there was nothing. My phone rang, startling me badly enough that I dropped it. I picked it up from the hail-covered ground and answered. "Mason, it's dispatch. Where are you? Your GPS signal went dark about 15 minutes ago." I looked at my phone's GPS app. It showed me on County Road 29, about 4 miles north of Highway 34, exactly where I should be. But according to the timestamp, it had just reconnected. For the last 17 minutes, my position had been unknown. "I'm on CR 29, I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "Just rode out a hailstorm, pretty severe, some signal interference from the weather." "Copy that. You still on schedule for the Sterling delivery?" I glanced at my rig. The windshield was a spiderweb of cracks. The hood was dimpled like a golf ball, and I could see daylight through gaps in the trailer panels. "I'm going to need a few hours. Took some hail damage. Need to assess if I can continue or need to arrange a tow." "Understood. Keep us posted." I hung up and walked back to my truck. The damage was extensive, but not catastrophic. The engine seemed fine, the transmission was responding, and while the windshield was nearly opaque, I could see well enough through the passenger side to continue driving. The trailer was a mess, but the cargo was industrial refrigeration units, heavy metal boxes that could take a beating. They'd probably be fine. But as I climbed back into the cab, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was a photograph on my passenger seat. A Polaroid, the old-style instant film kind that develops in front of you. I picked it up with trembling hands. The image showed a truck, a semi identical to mine, down to the model and company markings. It was parked on a gravel road in what looked like perfect weather conditions, blue sky and sunshine. But the driver's side door was open and the cab was empty. And in the background, barely visible but unmistakably present, were what looked like ice formations, not natural ones. Geometric patterns of ice, crystalline structures that rose from the ground like skeletal fingers. I flipped the photo over. On the back, written in faded blue ink, June 14, 2018, CR 29. Took the bait. That was 6 years ago. To the day. 6 years ago, someone else had been on this road, on this date, and had encountered something that involved ice and empty trucks and warnings written on the back of Polaroids. I looked at my dash clock, 4:47 p.m. The storm had passed, the road was clear, and I had a delivery to make. The professional thing would have been to get moving, file a damage report, collect my insurance payout, and forget about the weird experience I'd just had. But I couldn't stop staring at that photograph, at that empty driver's seat and those impossible ice structures in the background, at the warning written by someone who'd been here before me, who'd somehow known, or hoped, that their message would reach another driver 6 years later. I tucked the photo into my logbook and started driving north, following the same route the vanished truck had taken. I told myself I was just completing my journey, just getting back on schedule. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was looking for answers, and I had a terrible feeling I was going to find them. I didn't make it to Sterling that night. After driving another 10 miles north on County Road 29, I pulled into a truck stop outside Brush to properly assess the damage and try to get my head straight. The hail had done a number on my rig. The windshield would need complete replacement. The hood was going to require panel beating, and at least 3 trailer panels had buckled badly enough that I'd need a shop to fix them before continuing. I parked in the back corner of the lot, away from other trucks, and called my insurance company. They put me on hold for 20 minutes before connecting me with an adjuster who sounded both skeptical and exhausted. "Let me get this straight," she said. "You drove into a hailstorm?" "Through one. I was caught in it unexpectedly. Your GPS log shows you turned north off Highway 34. Toward the storm. That doesn't sound unexpected, Mr. Hartley." I rubbed my face tiredly. "Look, I've been driving this route for 9 years. I know how to read weather. The storm intensified faster than predicted. I got caught in the core before I could find safe shelter." She made a non-committal sound. "We'll send an inspector out tomorrow morning. In the meantime, you're authorized to rent a hotel room. Keep your receipts. And, Mr. Hartley, your file shows 3 previous weather-related claims in the last 5 years. The underwriters are going to want to review your risk profile. Translation: keep driving into storms, and we'll drop your coverage." I thanked her and hung up, knowing my storm-chasing hobby was going to cost me more than just deductibles. I grabbed my go-bag from the sleeper cab and headed into the truck stop proper. The place was standard mid-American truck stop architecture. Attached diner, small convenience store, showers in the back. A handful of drivers were scattered around the dining area, eating late dinners and watching a baseball game on the wall-mounted TV. I ordered coffee and a burger, then pulled out that Polaroid and studied it while I waited for my food. The more I looked at it, the more disturbing it became. The ice formations in the background were definitely not natural. They were too regular, too geometric, rising from the ground in perfect vertical lines. And the truck, my mind kept returning to how identical it was to my own rig. Not the same model and company. Literally identical. Down to the small dent in the left front quarter panel that I'd gotten 3 years ago backing into a loading dock. It was my truck in that photo. Somehow, impossibly, it was my exact truck, photographed 6 years before I'd bought it. The waitress brought my food, and I forced myself to eat, trying to organize my thoughts. I pulled out my phone and started Googling variations of County Road 29, Colorado, truck disappearance, and hailstorm anomalies. Nothing relevant came up. A few local news stories about severe weather damage, a historical society article about homesteading in the area, but nothing about vanishing vehicles or unexplained phenomena. I tried more specific searches. June 14, 2018, CR29, Colorado, truck missing Brush, Colorado, hailstorm, strange occurrence. Still nothing. Frustrated, I switched tactics and started looking through weather archives. No, I kept detailed records of severe weather events, including storm reports, hail sizes, and damage paths. I found the data for June 14, 2018, and pulled up the afternoon's activity. There had been a severe thunderstorm that day, similar to the one I'd just experienced. It had tracked across Morgan County between 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock p.m., producing hail up to tennis ball size and some wind damage. Multiple storm reports from law enforcement and spotters. Everything normal and documented, except for one detail. At 4:47 p.m., The exact time on my dash clock when I'd found the photograph, there was a single report from a sheriff's deputy near Brush. The text was brief. Investigated possible vehicle in distress on CR 29. Found no vehicle. Possible false report from storm chaser. No action taken. 4:47 p.m. 6 years ago. On the same road, at the same time, someone had reported a vehicle that then couldn't be found. Just like the truck I'd followed into the hail core. My burger sat half-eaten as I dug deeper into the archives. I went back another 6 years to June 14, 2012. Same location, same approximate time, same weather pattern. And buried in the incident reports, unconfirmed report of semi-truck with distress signals on CR 29. Search conducted, no vehicle located. I felt cold despite the warm diner every 6 years. June 14th, around 4:47 p.m., County Road 29. The pattern was repeating. I pulled out a notebook and started calculating. 2024, 2018, 2012. If the pattern held, there should be reports in 2006, 2000, 1994. I searched the archives, but they only went back to 2005 for this region. I needed older records, physical documents that hadn't been digitized. The waitress refilled my coffee. "You doing okay, hun? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Actually," I said, making a snap decision, "do you know if the library is still open? The one in Brush?" She glanced at the clock on the wall. "Closed an hour ago. Opens again at 9 tomorrow. You looking for something specific?" "Historical records. Old newspapers, weather events, that kind of thing." "Oh, you'll want Marge. She's the head librarian and the local history expert. Been there for probably 30 years. If it happened in Morgan County, she knows about it." I thanked her and finished my meal, then checked into the adjacent motel. The room was exactly what you'd expect. Questionable carpet, thin walls, a TV that got maybe 3 channels. But it was clean enough, and more importantly, it gave me a quiet space to think. I spread out on the bed with my laptop and phone, continuing my research. I found a Facebook group for Colorado storm chasers and started scrolling through old posts. Most of it was standard chaser fare. Radar screenshots, rotation videos, arguments about whether particular clouds were wall clouds or just scud. But then I found a thread from 3 years ago that made me sit up. User Planes Tracker 88 had posted, "Anybody else experience weird stuff on CR 29 north of Fort Morgan? Was chasing a hail core today and swear I saw another chase vehicle that just wasn't there when I got close. Like it disappeared into the hail." Several responses ranged from jokes about heat stroke to technical explanations about visibility and heavy precipitation. But one response from a user named StormVet was different. "CR 29 has a reputation. Been chasing for 15 years and I avoid that road during severe weather. Lost a friend there in '06. They called it an accident, but the scene never made sense. Ask some of the old-timers. They know." I clicked on StormVet's profile, but it had been deleted. Planes Tracker 88's account was still active, though. I sent them a message. "Saw your post from 2021 about CR 29. I had a similar experience today. Would like to compare notes if you're willing to talk." It was nearly 11 p.m. I doubted I'd get a response tonight, but it was worth a shot. I closed my laptop and tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes I saw those red taillights pulsing their SOS signal, saw the hailstones hanging motionless in the air, saw that empty truck in the Polaroid. Around 2 a.m. I gave up on sleep and went back to my rig. The truck stop was quiet, just a handful of idling semis and the low hum of refrigerated trailers. I climbed into my cab, intending to grab some paperwork from the sleeper, when I noticed something odd. My dash cam was blinking. The little LED indicator that showed it was recording was flashing red instead of its normal steady green. I'd installed the camera 2 years ago after an accident that wasn't my fault, but was hard to prove. It had a 128 GB card that could store about 48 hours of footage in a loop, automatically overwriting the oldest files. I pulled out my laptop and connected the camera, downloading the afternoon's footage. The files were there, time-stamped and organized. But when I tried to play the section from 4:30 p.m. to 5 p.m., the exact window when I'd been following the vanishing truck, the video was corrupted. Not blank, not missing, corrupted. The file existed, it was the right size, but when I opened it in my video player, all I got was static and distortion. White noise that occasionally resolved into fractured images. A glimpse of red lights, the white blur of hail, something that might have been ice formations but was too fragmented to be sure. I tried different video players, tried the recovery software I kept on my laptop for situations like this. Nothing worked. It was like the footage had been deliberately scrambled, reduced to visual noise that barely hinted at what had actually happened. But then I noticed something in the audio track. The video might have been destroyed, but the audio was mostly intact. I plugged in headphones and listened. For the first few minutes, it was exactly what you'd expect. The roar of hail impacting the truck, the rumble of my engine, the occasional curse word as I struggled with visibility. But at timestamp 4:44:17, something changed. The hail noise remained constant, but underneath it, there was a new sound. A low frequency tone, almost subsonic, that made my head ache when I listened to it. Not quite a hum, not quite a pulse. Something in between. And woven through that tone were higher frequency sounds that almost sounded like words. I adjusted the audio levels, boosting the mids and highs, trying to isolate whatever was buried in the recording. The words became clearer, though they still didn't make complete sense. Pattern holds, 6 years, next iteration, avoid the core, they're waiting in the hail. The voice was distorted, filtered through layers of static and interference. But it was definitely human. Someone speaking, their words somehow embedded in my dashcam audio from inside a hailstorm. Then, at timestamp 4:47:03, the exact moment when the taillights had gone dark, there was a sound like breaking glass combined with a scream. It lasted maybe 2 seconds, but it was visceral enough to make me pull the headphones off my ears. When I put them back on, the audio had returned to normal. Just hail and engine noise, no strange tones, no hidden voices. Whatever had happened during those 3 critical minutes had left its mark on my equipment, but the mark was fragmentary and nearly incomprehensible. I saved the audio file to 3 different locations: laptop, phone, cloud storage. Whatever this was, I wasn't going to lose the only evidence I had. My phone buzzed. A message from Planes Tracker 88. "Holy shit, you saw it too? I'm in Denver right now, but can drive out tomorrow if you want to meet. This isn't something to discuss over text." I replied, "Brush truck stop, noon tomorrow. I'm the guy with the hail-damaged Kenworth in the back lot." Their response came immediately. "See you then. And Mason, be careful. The pattern always completes itself, one way or another." That last sentence made my skin crawl. I closed all my devices and sat in the dark cab, listening to the truck stop's ambient noise and trying to convince myself that there was a rational explanation for everything I'd experienced. But deep down, I knew better. Something was happening on County Road 29 every 6 years, something involving vanishing trucks and impossible ice formations, and voices recorded in static. And I'd just become part of the pattern, whether I wanted to be or not. I thought about that Polaroid in my logbook, about the warning written on the back. Took the bait. Whatever this was, It was designed to lure people in. Storm chasers, probably, since they'd be the only ones crazy enough to drive toward severe weather instead of away from it. It used our curiosity, our need to see and understand and document, as bait, and I'd bitten down hard. The question now was whether I could get off the hook before it was too late, or whether, like that truck in the photo, I was already caught in something that wouldn't let me go. I finally fell into an uneasy sleep around 4 a.m., slumped in the driver's seat, dreaming of red lights pulsing in hail-white darkness and voices whispering from inside the storm. The pattern holds. 6 years. Next iteration. They're waiting in the hail. I woke at 8:30 a.m. to sunlight streaming through my shattered windshield and the sound of trucks rumbling past. My neck ached from sleeping at an awkward angle, and for a moment I couldn't remember where I was or why my truck looked like it had been through a war zone. Then it all came back. The hail core, the vanishing semi, the photograph and the corrupted dash cam footage, the meeting I'd arranged with Planes Tracker 88 at noon. I grabbed a shower at the truck stop. The water pressure was terrible, but the hot water worked, and changed into clean clothes. My phone showed 2 missed calls from dispatch and a text from the insurance adjuster saying she'd be at my location around 10 a.m. I also had a notification from my cloud storage service. The dashcam audio file I'd uploaded had been flagged for unusual content and placed in quarantine. That was new. I logged into my account and checked the file properties. According to the automated scan, the audio contained frequency patterns inconsistent with standard recording parameters and possible embedded data structures. The system had automatically separated it from my other files and marked it for manual review. I downloaded a fresh copy to my laptop before the cloud service could delete it entirely, then headed into the diner for coffee and breakfast. The morning crowd was different from last night. A mix of local farmers and road crews, plus a few truckers prepping for early runs. The TV was showing weather forecasts, and I caught the tail end of a severe weather outlook for eastern Colorado. Another round of supercells expected this afternoon and evening along the Palmer Divide. Large hail and damaging winds will be the primary threats, with an isolated tornado or two possible. Residents are advised to have multiple ways to receive warnings. June 15th, a day after my encounter. The pattern was on a 6-year cycle, but that didn't mean the area was safe between iterations. Severe weather was just part of life on the high plains. I was halfway through my eggs when a sheriff's deputy walked in and scanned the dining area. His eyes landed on me, and he walked over to my booth. "Mason Hartley?" he asked. "That's me." "Deputy Raines, Morgan County Sheriff's Office. Got a few minutes to answer some questions?" My stomach sank. "About what?" "Your incident yesterday on County Road 29. Insurance company called it in as a potential fraudulent claim. Said your GPS data showed you deliberately drove into a severe hailstorm." He pulled out a small notebook. "Mind telling me what you were doing up there?" I chose my words carefully. "I'm a commercial driver. I was en route from Denver to Sterling when I encountered severe weather. I attempted to avoid the worst of it, but misjudged the storm's intensity. That's all." "Uh-huh." He didn't sound convinced. "And you weren't storm chasing? Wasn't trying to get close to the hail core for photographs or video?" "I observe weather sometimes, yeah, but I wasn't intentionally putting myself or my cargo in danger. Because we've had issues with storm chasers on that road before. People driving into dangerous conditions, blocking emergency access routes, creating hazards for other drivers." He flipped through his notebook. "In fact, we've had several incidents on CR 29 over the years, including one yesterday, about 20 minutes before you showed up. Got a call from a resident about a semi-truck with its hazards on. Looked like it was in distress." I kept my expression neutral. "I didn't see any other trucks up there." "Yeah, that's the weird part. Deputy Chen responded to the call, got to the location within 15 minutes. No truck, no tracks, no evidence anyone had been there. Just like, he trailed off, flipping back a few pages. Just like the reports from 2018 and 2012. Same road, same kind of storm, same phantom truck. I met his eyes. You think I had something to do with that? I think you saw something. And I think you didn't report it because you were worried about your insurance claim. He closed his notebook. Here's my card. If you remember any details that might be relevant, any other vehicles, any unusual circumstances, give me a call. Meanwhile, stay off CR29. For your own safety. He left before I could respond. I finished my breakfast in silence, processing the encounter. The deputy clearly knew something was off about that road, but he was being careful about how much he said. The pattern of reports, the consistency across multiple years, he'd noticed, even if he couldn't explain it. The insurance adjuster showed up at 10:15, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who took photographs of my damage, measured hail impact dents, and filled out forms on a tablet. She was professional but skeptical, especially when she examined the trailer panels. These dents are consistent with large hail, she said. But the pattern is strange. See here? She pointed to a section of panel near the rear. The impacts are evenly distributed, almost geometric. Hail typically leaves random patterns. This looks almost intentional. I don't know what to tell you. That's how the storm left it. She made a note on her tablet. We'll process the claim, but expect a premium increase. And Mr. Hartley, my system shows your GPS signal disappeared for 17 minutes yesterday afternoon. That's unusual. GPS doesn't typically go offline unless there's significant equipment failure or deliberate jamming. The storm was severe. Electrical interference from lightning, maybe. Maybe. She didn't sound like she believed me. We'll be in touch. She left, and I spent the next hour securing a rental windshield through a local auto glass company. They promised installation by 3 p.m., which meant I'd lose most of the day but could potentially complete my delivery to Sterling by evening. At 11:45, I walked to the far end of the truck stop parking lot and waited. A few minutes later, a silver Ford Escape pulled in and parked next to my rig. The driver was a woman in her early 30s, wearing a University of Oklahoma storm-chasing t-shirt and carrying a laptop bag. "Mason?" she called out. "That's me. You must be Plains Tracker 88. Avery Sloan." She shook my hand, her grip firm. "Thanks for meeting. I wasn't sure you'd actually show up." "Why wouldn't I?" "Because most people who encounter what you encountered yesterday convince themselves it didn't happen. They rationalize it away, file it under weird experience, and move on. The fact that you're still investigating means you're either really brave or really stubborn." "Probably the second one," I said. "You want to talk in my cab or yours?" "Yours. I want to see the damage." We climbed into my Kenworth, and Avery immediately pulled out a device I didn't recognize, some kind of handheld scanner with a small display. She swept it around the cab, watching the readout intently. "What is that?" I asked. "Magnetometer. Measures magnetic field strength and distortions. If you experienced what I think you experienced, there should be residual." The device beeped sharply. "Yeah, there it is. Your cab is showing magnetic anomalies consistent with exposure to extreme electromagnetic fields, way beyond what normal lightning could produce." She showed me the display. I didn't understand most of the numbers, but the bar graph was clearly indicating something abnormal. "Okay," I said slowly. "So what does that mean?" "It means what you saw wasn't just a regular truck, and what you drove through wasn't just a regular hailstorm." She put the device away and pulled out her laptop. "Let me show you what I've been working on." She opened a document filled with data tables, photographs, and hand-drawn maps. 3 years ago, I had an experience almost identical to yours. June 14th, 2021, on County Road 29. I was chasing a supercell, got close to the hail core, and saw another chase vehicle ahead of me. Looked like it was in trouble. Hazard lights flashing, erratic movement. I followed it into the core to offer assistance. And it disappeared, I finished. Exactly. 1 second it was there, the next it was gone. No tracks, no evidence it had ever existed. But unlike you, I didn't have any proof. No photographs, no audio recordings, nothing. Just my word against the universe. People thought I'd hallucinated from lightning proximity or got confused in the low visibility. But you knew it was real. I knew it was real, so I started researching. Found the pattern of reports every 6 years, found the consistent timing and location, and I started talking to other storm chasers, asking if anyone else had seen weird stuff on that road. She pulled up a list of names. Over the past 3 years, I've identified 8 people who had experiences similar to ours. Most won't talk about it publicly, but privately they'll confirm it. Vanishing vehicles, usually trucks. Strange electromagnetic effects. Time anomalies. Time anomalies? GPS blackouts, like you experienced. But also clocks running wrong, people losing chunks of time they can't account for. One chaser swears he was in the hail core for maybe 5 minutes, but his dash cam showed nearly an hour of footage. All corrupted, just like yours, but the timestamps were there. I pulled out the Polaroid from my logbook and showed it to her. I found this on my passenger seat after the encounter, dated June 14, 2018. Avery's eyes widened. Oh my God, this is the first physical evidence anyone's found. Can I take a photo of it? Go ahead. She photographed both sides of the Polaroid, then studied the image on the back closely. Those ice formations. I've seen something similar in one of my visualizations. Here, look. She opened another file on her laptop, this one showing 3D renderings of what looked like crystalline structures. I've been working with a physicist friend of mine, trying to model what kind of conditions could create the effects we've observed. The magnetic anomalies, the electromagnetic interference, the apparent time distortion. Her theory is that under specific atmospheric conditions, extreme hail production, strong rotation, unusual vertical wind shear, you can get temporary formations of structured ice that act as waveguides for electromagnetic energy. Waveguides. Essentially, the ice crystals align in ways that concentrate and direct electromagnetic fields. Think of them like fiber optic cables made of frozen water. They can trap energy, bend it, create localized field effects that mess with electronics and maybe even space-time itself on a very small scale. I thought about those geometric ice structures in the Polaroid. So you're saying the hail creates these formations, and they somehow, what, trap vehicles? Not exactly. More like they create an intersection point. A place where the normal flow of cause and effect gets disrupted. You saw a truck that might not have been a truck at all, might have been more like an echo or a reflection of something that happened before, or will happen later. The pattern repeats every 6 years because that's how long it takes for the conditions to align properly. Same date, same location, same atmospheric setup. That's insane. I know, but it's the only theory that fits the data. She pulled up another file showing weather charts. Look at this. Every incident, every single one going back to at least 1994, occurred during nearly identical atmospheric conditions. Same temperature, same dew point spread, same wind shear profile, same storm motion. It's like the atmosphere is following a script, recreating the exact same setup every 6 years. I stared at the charts, seeing the patterns she was pointing out. The consistency was undeniable and deeply unsettling. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Do we just wait another 6 years for it to happen again?" "That's what I've been doing. Monitoring, collecting data, trying to find someone who could help me investigate properly. But here's the thing, Mason." She looked at me seriously. "The pattern isn't just about observation. It's about completion." "What does that mean?" "The incidents from 1994, 2000, 2006, 2012, 2018, they all involved disappearances or near disappearances. Vehicles that went into the hail core and either vanished completely or barely made it out. But yesterday, something changed. You followed the truck, you drove into the core, and you came back with evidence. That's never happened before. How do you know?" "Because I've been monitoring emergency frequencies and law enforcement reports for this region for 3 years. Every previous incident, the person either vanished completely or came out with no physical evidence. You're the first person to return with a Polaroid, with corrupted dash cam footage that actually captured something, with magnetic signatures on your equipment. You're the first person to interrupt the pattern instead of just becoming part of it." I felt cold despite the warm June air. "And that's good, right? I don't know, maybe. Or maybe you've just made yourself a target." She closed her laptop. "The fact that someone left you that Polaroid with a warning suggests there's an intelligence behind this. Something that understands the pattern and wants to either continue it or stop it. And you've just proven you're capable of interfering. So, what do I do? You have 2 choices. You can walk away, complete your delivery, go back to your normal life, and hope that whatever this is doesn't follow you. Or," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "or you can come with me this afternoon and help me investigate the source." "The source?" "The ice formations. According to my physicist friend's model, those structures don't just appear randomly during the hailstorm. They form around specific nucleation points, probably existing geological features that have the right mineral composition and magnetic properties. If we can find where those formations originate, we might be able to understand what's actually creating the pattern." I thought about Deputy Raines's warning to stay off CR-29. Thought about my insurance adjuster's skepticism and the damage to my rig. Thought about the fact that I had a job to do and responsibilities to meet. But I also thought about that voice in my corrupted dash cam audio. They're waiting in the hail. "When?" I asked. Avery smiled grimly. "Forecasts show another severe weather outbreak this afternoon. Not as intense as yesterday, but good enough. We've got maybe 4 hours before the storms start firing. That's enough time to get to CR-29, locate the nucleation points, and set up monitoring equipment before the hail starts." "This is insane. Completely. But you've already seen the impossible. Might as well find out why it's impossible." I should have said no. Should have thanked her for the information, finished my windshield replacement, and headed to Sterling to complete my delivery like a responsible adult. Instead, I found myself nodding. "Okay, let's do it. But we're taking my rig. If this goes wrong, I want a couple tons of metal between me and whatever's out there." "Deal, but Mason?" She looked at me intently. "If I say we need to leave, we leave immediately. No heroics, no staying to get one more measurement or one more photograph. This thing has made people disappear. I'm not interested in becoming the next victim." Agreed. We spent the next 20 minutes transferring Avery's equipment into my cab. The magnetometer, a portable weather station, 2 high-speed cameras with waterproof housings, and several other devices I didn't recognize. She also had printouts of maps showing County Road 29 with specific waypoints marked. "These are the locations where incidents have been reported," she explained. "I've been correlating them with geological survey data, trying to find common features. There's a spot about 5 miles north of Highway 34 where 3 separate reports clustered. That's where I want to start. That's close to where I saw the vanishing truck. Exactly. That's the hot zone. If there are stable nucleation points for the ice formations, they'll be there. My phone buzzed with a text from the glass company. The replacement windshield had arrived, and they could install it within the hour. I arranged for them to meet us at the truck stop, then helped Avery secure her equipment in my sleeper cab. As we worked, a thought occurred to me. The person who left me that Polaroid, the one from 2018. Do you know who they were? Avery's expression darkened. I have a theory. There was a storm chaser named Riley Webb who went missing in this area in June 2018. Official story was that he drove off the road during severe weather, and they never found his body or his vehicle. But the timing and location match our pattern exactly. You think Webb was the one who took that photo? I think Webb experienced the same thing we're about to investigate. And I think he left that photo as either a warning or a breadcrumb trail, hoping someone would follow it. She paused. What worries me is that if Webb left evidence behind, but still disappeared, well, that suggests knowing about the pattern doesn't necessarily save you from it. The glass technicians arrived and started working on my windshield. While they installed the new glass, Avery and I grabbed lunch and went over her plans. The forecast showed storms developing around 3 p.m., intensifying through the afternoon and evening. We'd have maybe 90 minutes of pre-storm conditions to survey the site, set up monitoring equipment, and get a baseline on the magnetic and atmospheric conditions. Then, if a hail core developed, we'd observe from a safe distance, or what Avery hoped would be a safe distance. Her equipment was designed to record data automatically, even if we had to evacuate the immediate area. One more thing, she said as we finished eating. If you see that truck again, the one with the SOS lights, don't follow it. Whatever it is, whatever it's showing us, it's designed to lure people into the core. That's the bait. The smart move is to document it from a distance, but resist the urge to investigate closely. Easier said than done. I know, but that's the difference between collecting data and becoming data. By 2:30 p.m., my new windshield was installed and we were ready to roll. The sky was already showing signs of development. Towering cumulus building to the west, the air thick and humid with that pre-storm heaviness. I started my engine, checked my mirrors, and pulled out of the truck stop parking lot. We were heading back to County Road 29, back to where the pattern lived and waited, back to the place where trucks vanished and ice formed impossible structures and voices whispered from inside the storm. And this time we were going in with our eyes open, knowing full well that we might not come back. Avery pulled out her magnetometer as we drove north on Highway 34. Already picking up readings. Ambient magnetic field is elevated. Not critically, but measurably higher than baseline. Is that normal for this area? No, it's one of the anomalies I've been tracking. The field strength fluctuates with weather patterns, gets stronger when severe storms are approaching, peaks when hail cores are present, then drops back to normal afterwards. It's like the storms are either being attracted to something magnetic, or they're creating the magnetic effects themselves. We turned onto County Road 29 and headed north. The gravel road stretched ahead exactly as I remembered it. Flat, straight, bordered by prairie grass and irrigation equipment. But now, with Avery's equipment monitoring our surroundings, I could see details I'd missed yesterday. Small variations in the roadbed, areas where the gravel seemed slightly different in color and texture. And ahead, about 4 miles north, a subtle rise in the terrain that might not be natural. That's it, Avery said, pointing at the rise. That's the primary nucleation zone. The geological surveys show unusual mineral concentrations there. High iron content, traces of magnetite, and something else they couldn't quite identify. Whatever's creating the pattern, it's centered on that spot. We parked about 100 yards south of the rise and got out. The wind was picking up, blowing from the northwest, carrying the smell of approaching rain. The towering cumulus we'd seen earlier was organizing into proper storm structure, anvils spreading against the blue sky. We had maybe an hour before the weather turned nasty. Avery set up her weather station and cameras, pointing them toward the rise in the northwestern sky. I helped her anchor the equipment against the wind, using my tie-down straps to secure the tripods. The magnetometer was showing steadily increasing field strength, and her laptop displayed real-time graphs of atmospheric pressure, temperature, and humidity. "Everything's escalating faster than forecast," she said, frowning at her screens. "The storm's developing ahead of schedule." I looked at the sky. The anvils were definitely expanding, and I could see the beginning of a wall cloud forming maybe 20 miles out. "Should we leave?" "Not yet, but soon. Let me get one survey of the nucleation zone first." She grabbed a backpack full of equipment and started walking toward the rise. I followed, my instinct screaming that this was a bad idea, but my curiosity overriding caution. As we climbed the subtle incline, I noticed something odd about the ground. The grass was shorter here, almost stunted, and the soil had a grayish tint that didn't match the surrounding prairie. "Avery, look at this." She knelt and took a soil sample, placing it in a small plastic bag. Ash content. Significant ash content mixed into the topsoil. Like something burned here, but not recently. This is old, weathered. Lightning strike? Too widespread. Lightning would create a localized burn pattern. This covers at least a quarter acre. She stood and swept her magnetometer across the area. The device immediately started beeping rapidly. "Shit, magnetic reading is off the charts. This isn't natural. This is..." Thunder rumbled to the northwest, much closer than it should have been. I looked up and saw the storm had intensified dramatically in just the few minutes we'd been examining the site. The wall cloud was now maybe 10 miles away and rotating visibly. "Avery, we need to go." "Just one more reading." "I need to confirm." She stopped mid-sentence, staring at her magnetometer. "Oh no." "What?" "The field strength. It's not just elevated, it's pulsing, like a heartbeat. And the frequency..." She looked up at me, her face pale. "It matches the audio pattern you recorded yesterday, the subsonic tone. This isn't random magnetic fluctuation, it's organized. It's structured." "Are you saying this thing is intentional?" "I'm saying whatever created this pattern might still be active." She grabbed her backpack. "We need to..." The hail started. No warning, no gradual buildup. One second the sky was merely threatening. The next it was dumping marble-sized ice stones with devastating intensity. We ran back toward my rig, arms over our heads, the impacts painful even through our clothing. I reached the cab first and yanked the door open, practically throwing Avery inside before climbing in after her. Hail hammered the roof and hood with that familiar deafening roar. Through the windshield I could see the wall cloud approaching much faster than physics should allow. "That's not possible," Avery said, staring at her laptop. "The storm's moving at nearly 60 miles per hour. That's twice as fast as forecast. And the rotation..." She pointed at the radar display. "Look at the velocity couplet. It's not just rotating, it's spinning up, right over us." I started the engine. "We're leaving, now." But when I put the transmission in reverse, nothing happened. The engine was running, the gauges showed normal readings, but the rig wouldn't move. I tried forward, still nothing. It was like we were locked in place. "Mason!" Avery's voice was barely audible over the hail. "Look." I followed her gaze out the windshield and felt my blood turn to ice. The ice formations were forming. Rising from the ground maybe 50 yards ahead, geometric structures of frozen water that grew as we watched. They weren't being built by the falling hail. They were emerging from the soil itself, pushing up through the earth like crystalline plants growing in fast forward. And they were glowing. Faintly, but unmistakably, each formation emitted a cold blue-white light from its core. "The nucleation points," Avery whispered. "They're activated. The hail isn't causing this. It's responding to it. The formations are creating the hail." As if to confirm her words, the hailstones began falling in patterns. Not random impacts, but organized streams, spiraling around the ice formations like water circling a drain. The formations were pulling the hail toward them, concentrating it, using it to grow larger and more complex. And between the formations, barely visible through the hail curtain, I saw the truck. Red taillights pulsing their SOS signal. The same semi I'd followed yesterday, or something wearing the same form. It was parked maybe 30 yards from the largest ice formation, its hazard lights reflecting off the crystalline structures. "Don't look at it," Avery said urgently. "It's the bait. It wants you to go investigate, to get close to the formations. That's how it—" My door opened. I didn't touch the handle. I wasn't even near it. But the door swung open on its own, and a blast of cold air filled the cab. Not just cold. Frozen Arctic. Air that should not exist in a Colorado summer, carrying with it the smell of ozone and something else, something organic and wrong. The SOS lights pulsed faster. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. Over and over, more urgent with each iteration. "Close the door," Avery said. "Mason, close the—" I was already climbing out. I couldn't help it. My body was moving on autopilot, drawn toward those lights and the formations behind them. Some part of my brain was screaming at me to stop, to get back in the cab, to drive away if the engine would let me. But a larger part was simply curious. Needed to know what was inside that truck. Needed to understand what the ice formations were showing me. Needed to complete the pattern. My feet crunched on hail-covered ground. The stones were still falling, but they parted around me like I had my own invisible umbrella. Where I walked, there was clear air. Where I wasn't, the hail hammered down with undiminished intensity. "Mason!" Avery's voice, distant and muffled. "Don't!" I kept walking. The truck was so close now, just a few more steps, just a few more. A hand grabbed my shoulder and spun me around. Avery, her hair plastered to her face with melted ice, her eyes wide and terrified. "Look down," she said. "Before you take another step, look down." I looked. I was standing at the edge of a circle. A perfect geometric circle, maybe 40 feet in diameter, marked in the ground by a thin line of ice. Inside the circle were the formations, glowing brighter now, pulsing in rhythm with something I could feel but not hear. And the truck was inside the circle, but it wasn't on the ground anymore. It was hovering maybe 3 inches above the surface, suspended by forces I couldn't begin to understand. And beneath the truck, visible through the gap between its chassis and the earth, was movement. Shadows flowing like liquid, forming shapes that almost looked like people, Avery said. "The shadows are trying to form people. Everyone who's ever been caught in the pattern. They're trapped in there, pressed into the space between the truck and the ground. That's what happens if you cross the circle." I took a step back, then another. The pull was still there, still urging me forward, but Avery's grip on my shoulder and the sight of those writhing shadows was enough to break the compulsion. We ran back to my cab, and this time when I tried the transmission it worked. The rig lurched backward, tires struggling for traction on the hail-slick road. The ice formations were growing taller now, maybe 15 feet high, and the truck was rising with them. Its taillights had stopped pulsing SOS and were now just solid red, like eyes watching us retreat. I got us turned around and accelerated south, away from the nucleation zone and toward Highway 34. In my mirrors, I could see the storm was intensifying even further. The wall cloud lowering, the hail core expanding. And at the center of it all, barely visible through the precipitation curtain, those ice formations stood like sentinels. We made it back to the highway without incident. The storm was moving northeast now, away from our position, the hail tapering off. Within minutes, the sky behind us was clearing, that characteristic post-storm light making everything look washed and new. Avery was shaking, whether from cold or fear or both, I couldn't tell. "Your door," she said. "It opened by itself." I know. That's never happened before in any of the reports. The pattern's evolving. It's getting stronger. I drove us back to the brush truck stop in silence, my mind trying to process what we'd seen. The ice formations, the hovering truck, the shadows beneath it that had almost been people. And most disturbing of all, the fact that I'd been willing, eager even, to cross that circle and join whatever was waiting inside. We pulled into the parking lot and sat there for a long moment, neither of us speaking. Finally, Avery pulled out her laptop and checked the recordings from her cameras. The footage was there, time-stamped and apparently intact, showing the rise, the ice formations growing, the truck hovering. "This is it," she said quietly. "This is the proof we needed. Real, documented evidence that something impossible is happening on County Road 29. What do we do with it? I don't know. Share it with researchers? Post it online? Turn it over to law enforcement?" She shook her head. "Probably none of those will believe us. They'll say it's a hoax, CGI, anything to avoid accepting that the laws of physics aren't quite as fixed as we thought." "But we know," I said. "We saw it. Yeah, we saw it. And now we're part of the pattern, whether we want to be or not." She closed her laptop. "The question is, what happens in 6 years? Will we be able to resist the pull next time, or will we end up as shadows under that truck, waiting for the next person to almost cross the circle?" I didn't have an answer. We sat in my cab as the sun set and the storm clouds dispersed, knowing that we'd glimpsed something that shouldn't exist and survived. But survival wasn't the same as escape. The pattern would come around again. 6 years from now, June 14th, 2030, County Road 29 would have another severe weather outbreak. The ice formations would grow, the truck would appear, the shadows would reach out for new additions, and somewhere someone would see red lights pulsing through a hail core and decide to investigate. I just hoped that someone wouldn't be me. The dreams started a week after our encounter. Always the same. I'm driving toward the circle, the shadows reaching out from beneath that hovering truck. When I wake, I hear that voice from my corrupted dashcam. The pattern always completes itself. I called Avery in early July. "I've been having them too," she said before I could explain. "The dreams, and other things, magnetic effects. My phone goes haywire. Yesterday, all the frozen food in my cart melted while I was shopping. I'd noticed the same. Electronic glitches. A strange coldness even on hot days. Ice cubes arranging themselves in geometric patterns. "We need to talk to Dr. Marcus Brennan," Avery said. Retired atmospheric scientist in Boulder. He's studied these phenomena for decades. We met Brennan the following week. He was in his 70s, sharp-eyed, his living room filled with the weather instruments and old photographs of supercells. "County Road 29, he said immediately. 6-year cycle, vanishing vehicles, magnetic anomalies. When you called about experiencing something impossible in a hailstorm, it was obvious where you'd been. He listened as we described everything. The ice formations, the hovering truck, the shadows, the circle we'd barely avoided crossing. What you experienced is a convergence event, he explained. Under specific conditions, severe storms create temporary ice structures that act as electromagnetic capacitors. They can trap energy, information, even consciousness itself. The people you saw as shadows, they're electromagnetic echoes, consciousness patterns preserved in crystalline structures. Can they be freed? Avery asked. Brennan's expression darkened. Theoretically, yes, if someone could disrupt the formations during a convergence event. But that would require being close to them during their active phase, precisely when they're most dangerous. He paused. My advice? Stay away. You got lucky once. Don't push it. But I couldn't stop thinking about those trapped people. We have to try, I told Avery on the drive back. She was quiet for miles. Finally, if we do this, we plan carefully. We use the next 6 years to develop countermeasures. And we don't go in until we're certain we can succeed. 6 years. June 14th, 2030. The next convergence. We spent those years preparing with obsessive dedication. Avery secured research funding through a private foundation, though she had to obscure the true nature of our project. Dr. Mitchell and her team designed EMP generators and ultrasonic emitters that could theoretically shatter the ice formations, working late into countless nights running simulations and stress tests. I converted a trailer into a mobile lab, spending my savings on electromagnetic shielding and backup power systems. Every piece of equipment was tested, retested, and tested again. I installed redundant cooling systems, reinforced the chassis to handle the weight of our disruptors, and added a secondary control station in case the primary failed. We recruited Jackson, a radar specialist who'd had his own unsettling experience on CR-29 back in 2012. He'd seen the Phantom truck too, though he'd managed to turn back before crossing the circle. His expertise proved invaluable. He developed custom software to detect pre-convergence signatures, subtle radar anomalies that appeared 15 to 20 minutes before the formations became visible. These early warnings would be our only advantage, our narrow window to set up equipment before the pattern fully activated. As June 2030 approached, tension built. This wasn't research anymore. This was a rescue mission with potentially fatal consequences. On June 14th, we set up at the brush truck stop. By 3:47 p.m., Jackson detected the signatures. Storm will cross CR-29 at 4:51 p.m. That's our target. We drove to the nucleation zone and deployed the disruptors in a semicircle around the rise. At 4:48 p.m., the ice formations began emerging from the soil, glowing with cold blue-white light. Activating disruptors, I said. The units hummed to life. Cracks appeared in the ice structures. It was working. But then the truck appeared, red taillights pulsing their SOS. The pull hit me immediately, stronger than before. "Mason, stay in the cab," Avery's voice over the radio, but I could barely hear her. The formations were resisting, one beginning to regrow. I grabbed our backup EMP unit and ran toward them. "Don't cross the circle," someone shouted. Too late. I was already across, the pull overwhelming. But I pushed forward, activated the EMP directly against the central formation. It shattered, exploding into vapor. The other formations collapsed in sequence. The shadows beneath the truck rose up, people, dozens of them. Translucent but unmistakably human. Riley Webb, Deputy Chen, others. They dispersed upward like morning mist. The truck vanished. The circle was just ground again. Avery and the team pulled me back. "You did it," she said. "The pattern is broken." 2 days later, Deputy Rains called. Deputy Chen just walked into the station. Says he was investigating a truck on CR-29 during a hailstorm. But that was 18 years ago. He hasn't aged a day. Over the following weeks, more people returned. Storm chasers from decades ago. A farmer lost in '94. All with no memory of the time that passed. The media went wild with theories, none close to the truth. County Road 29 is just a normal road now. The formations are destroyed, the pattern broken. But sometimes, during severe weather, I still see red lights pulsing in my peripheral vision. My dash cam still glitches. I still set off metal detectors. I'm marked. We all are. We carry traces of it that will probably never fade. But that's a small price for freeing those trapped patterns. For breaking a cycle that claimed dozens of people over decades. I still chase storms, but with deeper understanding now. The boundary between normal physics and something else can grow thin. And when you cross that boundary and survive, you never quite come all the way back. The pattern is broken. The people are free. If I sometimes see those red lights pulsing in the hail, well, that's just the price of being the one who broke it. I can live with that.